Yeah, hold on to your seats. Lights is riding shift. 5K1 Killer. Let's get into it.
5K.1 Killer by Deshaun Jones. Atlanta, Georgia, 5:42 a.m. The sun hadn't even blinked yet, and neither had 9. He stood in front of his mom's small brick house on the south side, shirtless, sweat glistening off his tattooed chest. His mind was too heavy to sleep. The money was good, real good. But something in the air felt wrong, offbeat, unbalanced. His name was Timothy Jones, but the streets called him 9, not for the gun, not for the rep, but for his mind. 9 represented completion, power, divinity. He was sharp, calculated, and cleaner than most in his line of work. At just 29 years old, he'd become the top transporter for Lil D, a Miami plug who moved like the president, bulletproof Suburbans, no phones, and meetings only in living rooms where mothers baked cakes in the kitchen. That's how Miami played it. You show me where your mama stay, I'll show you where mine stay. It kept the betrayal low, but not impossible. 9 didn't sell dope. He moved it. Big difference. His job was to get bricks from South Florida up the turnpike and into the heart of Georgia without blinking. No hands, no samples, just motion. He had just dropped off 40 kilos 2 days ago. But this morning came with silence. Then boom! The front door exploded off the hinges. He hit the ground fast. Military boots stormed in, yelling, "Get down! Get the fuck down!" His mama screamed from the hallway in a robe. They slammed her to the ground like she was a weight bench. She cried out his name, Timothy. But he couldn't answer. He was face down, handcuffed, and still processing what the hell just happened. 2 hours later, interrogation room. The room was cold. The table was steel, and the man sitting across from him had the scent of a snitch recruiter. "Mr. Jones," the agent started, flipping through a thick folder. "You're a smart man. We know who you are. You never got caught dirty. Never been popped for selling. No phone taps. No wires. That's impressive." 9 didn't speak, just stared. But this time, the agent said, sliding over a blurry picture of a living room with bricks stacked like Legos, "We found 36 keys in that trap house you pulled up to 2 nights ago. Same one Lil D been using. Same one you had the keys to." Still, 9 said nothing. The agent leaned in. "Let me make this simple. Give us Lil D. Testify. Tell us how he moves, where he keeps his money. Do that, and this can go away." 9 smiled, calm, quiet, almost amused. "You ever heard of the 5% Nation?" he asked. The agent blinked. "What?" 5% of us know the truth. 85% is blind, and 10%, well, them the devils who run this shit." The agent sighed. "All right, let's play dumb then." Fulton County Courthouse. Day 9 of Trial 9 sat stone-faced in the courtroom. His Cartier glasses reflected the dull light above him, the thick frames hugging his high cheekbones like armor. He didn't blink once during the entire cross-examination of a so-called eyewitness. The jury watched him like a predator behind a cage. But his eyes, calm, calculated. His designer glasses didn't hide his truth. They magnified it. Every word spoken against him was a lie. Every nod from the prosecutor, every fake tear from witnesses, every sideways glance from his lawyer confirmed one thing in his mind. Man's law was fake. Only God's law was real. The prosecutor, some Harvard boy named Ellis, had slick hair and arrogance spilling from his mouth. Mr. Jones ran a multi-state drug enterprise. He didn't just deliver cocaine. He commanded respect, instilled fear, and built a silent empire behind the facade of a quiet Southern gentleman. He never got his hands dirty. He used others. He manipulated. And when he was caught, he refused to speak. Ellis turned toward the jury, voice lowering like he was revealing a ghost story. Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't just cocaine. This was 90% pure Colombian cocaine, uncut, the kind cartel bosses go to war over. He wasn't just part of the operation. He was trusted to move that weight. That makes him dangerous. Nine leaned back in his chair slowly, crossing his arms, still unblinking behind his lenses. His mind wasn't here. It was higher. He thought of the lessons of the 5% nation, how only the chosen truly see what's real. 85% are blind, 10% control the world, and 5%, we the gods that walk it. He was one of the 5. They just didn't know. Verdict: guilty. The gavel slammed like a pistol shot. He didn't flinch. The judge cleared her throat, pretending to be neutral. Timothy Jones, I sentence you to 55 years in the Georgia Department of Corrections. May God have mercy on your soul. He stood tall, nodded once to the ceiling, acknowledging Allah, not the court, and turned to be cuffed. 2 weeks later, isolation cell, 24-hour lockdown. Cell 314. Cold. Metal bed, no window. One slit in the door for food. 9 sat on the floor in a yoga position, shirtless, body still cut like steel. His mind was calm, his soul was armored. Then he heard the knock. Not a guard's knock. This one was different, coded. Clank, clank, pause, clank. The door opened. 2 men in suits, one white, one black. Both had government in their veins. Feds. They walked in slow. The white one spoke first. You're a hard man to break, Mr. Jones. That's what they keep telling us. 9 didn't move. The black Fed tried the good cop role. We ain't here to play with you. You already did state. But what's coming next? That's federal, and we don't play by the same rules. 9 looked up, finally blinking once. What rules y'all play by? The Constitution? He laughed to himself. They didn't respond. The white agent placed a file on the metal sink. This here's your federal indictment. You're looking at conspiracy to traffic controlled substances across state lines, money laundering, and organized criminal enterprise. If convicted, that's 22 years, minimum. He pointed to the word consecutive. Added to your 55 in the state, that's life. 9 stood slowly, eyes narrowing. So what y'all want? He asked flatly. Lil D, they both said in unison. 9's jaw flexed, but he smiled. I told your people already. I don't speak pig Latin. The black agent snapped. You got a son, Jones? Niece? Somebody you care about. They know where she live. You think Miami games don't stretch to Georgia? 9 stepped forward, chest to chest. You don't scare me. But I'll tell you what do scare me, dying a coward. Telling on men I broke bread with, that's worse than death. The agent stared. 1 exhaled. You'll regret this. 9 leaned closer. You already do. They left. He sat back down on the floor, crossed his legs again, stared at the wall. They didn't break him. They baptized him. Chapter 2. Trial and Betrayal. 5. K.1. Killer by Deshaun Jones. 1 year before the trial. Miami, Florida. The air in Miami had a different kind of heat. The kind that sticks to your neck like sweat and snakes around your spine when you're around real killers. In a 2-story house just off Northwest 119th Street, inside a living room where an old woman stirred oxtails on the stove, a meeting was going down. 9 sat on the floral couch with plastic still on the cushions. Across from him sat Lil D, his plug and supposed brother in arms. A short, brown-skinned Haitian with gold fangs and permanently bloodshot eyes. He wore a Miami Heat jersey, but there was nothing warm about his vibe. Auntie hummed church songs in the background. That's how Miami operated. Business was handled in family homes, not on corners or hotel rooms. Everyone had a mother, and when shit went wrong, she died first. It was a rule, a game, a threat, a promise. "You move this 40 by Friday?" Lil D asked, flipping his grill open as he smiled. "That I-75 motion gotta be clean." 9 nodded. "I already got drivers lined up. Alabama need 20. Atlanta gone, eat the rest." They bumped fists. That was the last real moment of respect. Fast forward, 6 months later, Althea Buafo's law office. Atlanta. Althea Buafo was slick. A defense lawyer with the style of a first lady and the mind of a mob boss. She represented hustlers, rappers, and political crooks. She was well known. But with notoriety came pressure. When she got Nine's case, she was intrigued. No prior felonies, no dirty hands, no recordings. Just a raid, a seizure, and silence. Pure silence. The kind of silence that scared the feds. So they came for her. "You're on our list too, Miss Buafo," a federal agent told her inside her own office one night. "You've been connected to several of your clients' enterprises. Do you want to keep your license or not?" That night she didn't sleep. She prayed. She cried. Then she folded. Trial week, Fulton County Superior Court. To the outside world, it looked like Althea was fighting hard for 9. Objections, motions, eye contact. But behind the scenes, she was leaking his strategy to the prosecution. She pushed him to take a deal quietly, but he never budged. "I ain't no rat," 9 told her one night. "Whatever time I get, I'll serve it like a king." Her lips tightened. She had already made her deal with the devils. State versus Timothy Jones, closing arguments. Althea stood and spoke to the jury, but her voice lacked fire. "Mr. Jones is a man who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The prosecution has offered you no fingerprints, no recordings, no text messages, just witnesses trying to save themselves." But it was hollow. Her rhythm was off. She didn't believe it, and the jury could feel that. Backstage, U.S. Attorney's Office. Deal with the devil. Lil D was sitting in a secure building in Miami with U.S. Marshals. Cold room, surveillance camera. Agent Weller slid a piece of paper across the table. "Sign that. Testify against Jones. We make the rest go away." Lil D smirked. "Put protection on my mama house, then we talk." They agreed. He signed. The game was sealed. After the trial, isolation cell. Day 10-9 was in his boxers, doing push-ups slowly, sweat dripping onto the concrete. A letter lay folded on his bed, a court copy of the sealed cooperation. Agreement, Lil D. The moment he read it, he stopped mid-rep. His arms dropped. But his face, stone. His Cartier glasses sat on the desk nearby. He slid them back on. He looked at the wall and whispered, "I got you, D. Even from in here, I got you." 2 weeks later, federal indictment served. 2 marshals walked into the unit with papers in hand. The door buzzed. 9 stood already dressed. He knew this was coming. "Jones, you've been indicted by the United States of America," one said. "Conspiracy to traffic over 5 kilos of cocaine across state lines in violation of 21 U.S. Code Section 846. You've been named in a continuing criminal enterprise investigation." 9 smirked. "That all?" They escorted him out. As he walked past other cells, whispers followed. "Damn, that's the Fed sweep. They're trying to bury him." But 9 just smiled. Because he knew something they didn't. His war was just beginning. Chapter 3. Prison Politics Begin 5. K.1. Killer by Deshaun Jones. Smith State Prison. Gladiator School. Smith State wasn't a regular prison. It was war school for the forgotten. nicknamed Gladiator School. By those who survived it, the yard was a battlefield and the dorms happened daily. 9 had been there less than a month. He already had a blade under his mattress and his back to the wall. They called him New Blood, but his demeanor was old soul. He never sagged his blues, never begged for commissary, and never asked what another man had on his tray. But for all his street experience, prison moved differently. And the first person to recognize that wasn't a gangster. It was an old man named Mr. Larry. The chess table, rec yard, midday. Mr. Larry looked like somebody's granddad. Gray beard, glasses, skin weathered like Georgia clay. But there was a sharpness in his eyes, a stillness in his hands. He motioned to 9. "Want to learn how to play chess?" 9 smirked. "I know how." Larry smiled. "I ain't talking about the board. I'm talking about life." 9 sat down. They started playing. Larry moved a pawn. "You think you got betrayed by a drug dealer, right?" 9's eyes didn't leave the board. "Lil D, my plug, Miami, set me up." Larry nodded. "And who arrested you?" "The police." Larry chuckled. "So you think it's drug dealers versus police? Ain't that what it is?" Mr. Larry paused the game and leaned in with the type of voice old hustlers used when dropping atomic knowledge. 70% of these so-called drug dealers are really police. 9 frowned. "What you mean?" "And 70% of these so-called police used to be drug dealers." 9 leaned back, confused, interested, off balance. Larry continued, "Son, you ever seen American Gangster?" "Yeah, Frank Lucas." "You remember who he told on?" "The cops." Mr. Larry leaned back. "Exactly. And not no 1 or 2 cops either. A whole task force. Most of Harlem was being fed by the police. The dope came from the top. That's always been the game. These officers ain't just chasing bricks. They protecting them, moving them, taxing them." 9's face tightened. He was listening now. "And these boys you was running with, most of them flipped before the cuffs even clicked. These dope boys doing all the talking, selling you out for less time and witness protection." Larry stared him down. "The game been reversed. You in here thinking you solid 'cause you ain't fold. But the whole table you was. Playing at, bent, crooked, rigged." 9 sat silent. "Tell me this," Larry said. "Who gets arrested more, the plug or the mule?" "The mule," 9 answered. "Who gets less time?" 9 didn't answer. He already knew. Mr. Larry pushed his knight forward. "You've been playing checkers in a chess world, son. And if you don't learn how these pieces move, you gon' die in a cell or live as a pawn." That night, dorm E2, bunk 12, 9 laid in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about everything Larry said. The words echoed in his skull louder than the guard radios outside his door. The game been reversed. You in here thinking you solid, but the table was rigged. Who gets arrested more, the mule or the plug? He thought about Frank Lucas sitting in court, naming crooked cop after crooked cop. He thought about his trial, how fast those witnesses flipped. He thought about Miss Christian, a young black female officer who had tried to help him earlier that week, slid him extra mail, offered words of encouragement. He brushed her off hard. "I don't deal with cops," he told her. "But maybe, just maybe, everybody wore a badge. Some just didn't show it." Flashback. A few days ago, Miss Christian. "You ain't like them other dudes, Jones. You got something in your eyes. Real power, real discipline. Don't let this place steal it." 9. "I don't need advice from a cop." She stared at him a long time, hurt. "I'm more real than most of these boys you looked up to." She walked away. He never responded. But now her voice returned to him like a whisper under his pillow. Next day, Yard 9 walked back to the chess table. Mr. Larry was already waiting. Ready to play? Larry asked. 9 nodded. This time, I'm listening too. 3 days later. Admin hallway near the infirmary. 9 had been thinking about it ever since his second chess game with Mr. Larry. The pieces started moving in his mind, same way they moved on that board. And one of those pieces he'd overlooked was Miss Christian. He saw her in the hallway, short brown skin glowing under the dull prison lights, pressed uniform, and a walk that held both elegance and command. She wasn't like the others. She never looked down on the inmates, but she never acted weak either. As she turned the corner, clipboard in hand, she spotted him standing near the ice machine. She paused. He took a step forward. "Officer Christian," 9 said, voice low, calm. She gave him a guarded look. "What? You need a kite to medical?" "Nah, I owe you an apology." She raised an eyebrow. He took a breath. "You was right. I came at you wrong. I lumped you in with them, the rest of these COs. But you ain't like them. I see that now." She studied him for a second longer, then sighed. "I ain't mad, Jones. You just playing defense like any soldier would." He tilted his head. "Soldier?" She leaned back against the cinder block wall, folded her arms. "I did 2 tours, Army, Iraq. I know what it looked like when a man been captured. You a prisoner of war, but not just locked up by bars, locked up by betrayal, by silence, by that code y'all die by but most don't live by." 9 went quiet. "I've been watching you," she continued. "You walk the yard like a general. Even your enemies respect your posture. You don't fold, you don't beg. But the war you fighting," she tapped her chest, "it's internal now. That's the one that breaks the strongest men." He looked her in the eye. "So what you saying?" She stepped closer, her voice now barely above a whisper. "I'm saying you not alone. I may wear this badge, but I ain't no cop. I'm a black woman who sees what this system do to our kings. I can't break the walls, but I can open some doors." She paused. "I'll supply the work. You build the economy." 9's eyes narrowed, surprised, not by the offer, but by her understanding. "You sure you know what you saying?" he asked. "I've seen worse," she said, eyes fierce. "And I seen better men do less with more. This place don't scare me." He nodded slowly, something inside him shifting. Not weakness, clarity. "All right then," he said. "Let's build." Later. That night, dorm E2, bunk 12. He sat back on his bunk, eyes fixed on the ceiling again. Mr. Larry's words replayed in his head. 70% of the police are the dealers. 70% of the dealers are the informants. But Miss Christian was neither. She wasn't the law. She was the key. And with her help, he was about to rewrite the rules of war. 6 months later, Smith State Prison. What started as conversations over chess pieces became a full-blown political restructure of the entire compound. Between Mr. Larry's wisdom and 9's militant discipline, they built something few had ever seen. Order in chaos. They didn't just run a gang, they ran the compound. The Bloods and Crips stopped feuding after Mr. Larry made the shot callers sit at the same table. The Muslims respected 9, even if some feared his rising influence. The COs began asking Larry for help managing unit schedules. Even the warden, a heavy-set man named Bricker, started relying on Larry to keep the peace. It was unofficial rule. Inmate power. Smith State, ice room, count time. The compound was still. Count time meant silence. Inmates on bunks, guards pacing halls, radios low. But in a back corridor near the infirmary, past the mop closet and rusted vending machine, was a room few used anymore. The old ice room. It was supposed to hold dry storage. But today, it held a secret. 9 stood shirtless in the dim cold, breathing slow, eyes locked on Miss Christian as she shut the door behind her, glancing both ways. She wore her uniform like armor, tight in the right places, belt loose, radio off. She stepped toward him like she wasn't even thinking. Or maybe she was thinking too much. "You sure?" she whispered. Nine didn't answer. He just pulled her close, and their mouths collided like pressure and release. Her fingers gripped his back. His hands explored every inch of her hips. The cold walls, the steel shelves, the sound of the ice machine humming in the background. None of it mattered. They made love like it was their last night on Earth. Raw, urgent, honest. Not sex, release. Every thrust was a memory. Every moan was a confession. And when it was done, she rested her head on his chest, heart still pounding. She whispered, "I swear, I'm gonna help you get out this place." Nine rubbed her lower back, his mind still heavy. "We had a plan." She looked up. "Had?" He nodded. "It went left. We trusted the wrong dude. Maintenance man ran with 20 bands. Larry wants him gone." Her eyes widened. "Number, don't let him do that. That ain't the move. He already called the hit." She grabbed his arm, tight. "Tell him to fall back, Nine." "That ain't." "Chess, that's checkers. That'll get you all moved, or buried." Nine sighed. "I tried. Larry ain't listening. He's moving off pain, embarrassment." Miss Christian shook her head. "That old man got knowledge, but he's slipping into his ego. He think it's still the 90s. But this ain't that. This prison, it's wired different now. That hit gon' flip somebody, and they gon' flip on you." Nine looked away. She cupped his face. "Please, promise me you won't let them take you too." He kissed her gently one more time. "I ain't never been taken," he said softly. "Just repositioned." 1 week later, emergency transfer orders filed just as she predicted. The murder flipped the yard upside down. Scooty told everything, and Miss Christian watched with glassy eyes as they walked Nine out in belly chains, his face still calm, but her soul torn. He turned to look at her one last time as the bus door slammed shut. No words, just understanding. He was gone. Chapter 4, Miss Lane 5, K.1, Killer by Deshaun Jones. Wayross, Georgia, arrival day. The chains were tighter this time. Thicker cuffs, heavier shackles. The transport van moved slow through the backwoods like it was delivering a nuclear threat. Not a man, but to the Georgia Department of Corrections. Timothy 9 Jones was exactly that, a controlled threat. And this wasn't just any prison. Wayross, a place soaked in the blood of history. In the 1800s, it was a slave-breaking ground, known for whipping the spirit out of Africans until they forgot their names. Now, it was a modern-day hellhole for the broken, a mental warfare compound. Inmates didn't just die here, they gave up here. Wayross wasn't made to hold you. It was made to erase you. Dorm 5A, Wayross Prison. The smell hit him first, bleach and sweat, the kind of scent that stuck to your soul. Inmates stared through cell bars like ghosts trapped in concrete. No music, no yelling, just watching. Nine walked through with his head high, his eyes locked on every camera, every tier, every exit. He moved like he'd been here before. Because spiritually, he had. He'd survived Smith. He'd survived betrayal. And now he was ready to rebuild. 48 hours in. Prison library. Wayross was run tight. No phones, no movement without paperwork, no access without permission. But Nine played chess, not checkers. And chess masters knew the power wasn't always in the yard. Sometimes it was in the library. That's where he met her. Miss Lane. Brown skin smooth like Sunday prayer, lips soft but firm, and curves that made you forget where you were. But her eyes? All business. She didn't flirt. She didn't play. She controlled the paperwork flow, the movement slips, and the off-the-books inmate access. You wanted power at Wayross. You needed Miss Lane. First conversation, behind the legal shelf. "I read your file," she said, not looking up from her clipboard. "Yeah," Nine said, glancing at her hips as she bent down to shelve a dusty folder. "You the one from Smith, the one with the body trail?" "Rumors." "Bodies don't lie," he smirked. "And what they say about you?" "That I'm the reason this place still halfway functional," he nodded. "Then we both necessary." She finally looked up. "I don't help crash dummies. I don't sneak in phones for clowns. You a boss? Prove it." Nine stepped closer, quiet but intense. "I don't prove nothing. I move everything." She paused, then smiled. 2 weeks later, Operation Rebuild. It started slow. Miss Lane pulled the right files, rerouted inmate work schedules, and got Nine moved from 5A to a quieter dorm, Dorm 3C, the book dorm, where the thinkers and hustlers stayed low. Nine tapped into the mailroom through her connections, using envelopes and ink codes to reach back to his street team in Georgia. Soon, they were back moving Zaza, Zans, fentanyl, and cell phones inside dorms, all hidden inside commissary boxes and wrapped inside legal folders. Miss Lane didn't just sneak things in. She built an invisible pipeline. She was the UPS of power. And Nine, he was the FedEx of control. One night, after lockdown, Miss Lane lingered near the filing cabinets after count. The hallway was quiet. "Why'd you pick me?" she asked. "I didn't," Nine said. "You picked me. You just ain't know it yet." She laughed softly. "You ever think about leaving it behind? The game, the war?" He looked at her, eyes low, truthful. "I tried, but every time I turn my back on the game, it taps me on the shoulder and says, 'You forgot this.'" She stepped closer, inches away now. "You still in pain, Nine. You smile like you good. But I see it. You a soldier without a country." He swallowed. "I ain't looking for a country." She touched his chest. "Then what you looking for?" His hand slid over hers. "Control, peace, revenge, in that order." She nodded, then pulled away. "I can help with that." Final scene. Dorm 3C. Late night Nine sat on the edge of his bunk, scrolling through his plan in his head. Wayross thought it could break him, but all it did was reforge him. Smith made him violent. Wayross made him strategic. And Miss Lane, she wasn't just a plug. She was his infrastructure. And soon, the 5K.1 killer would rise again. Wayross Prison, Georgia's underground coliseum. From the outside, Wayross looked like any other high-security facility. Razor wire fences, guard towers, concrete yards. But inside, it was something else, something darker. The warden ran death matches, unspoken, unwritten, but very real. He called it keeping the wolves sharp. But it was deeper than that. It was a sport, complete with inside bets, point systems, and payoffs. Rival gangs were manipulated into clashes, and correction staff placed side bets through COs, nurses, and even kitchen workers. There were no cameras in certain corridors for a reason. COs staged accidental moves, putting Bloods and Crips in the same showers, mixing Ghostface and Muslims in the same pods. They'd lock the gates and just walk away. Last man standing walked free. Sometimes. The rest? Ziploc body bags. Dorm 3C. Nine watches the setup. Nine had already started to sense it. He noticed how fights didn't happen by chance. They were staged. One morning, a GD named Kane was escorted to the yard by 2 guards. A Crip named J. was sent out 10 minutes later. Mistakenly. There was no mistake. 10 minutes later, Kane was dead. stabbed through the neck with a sharpened comb. Word came back the guards had money on it. 9 saw the whole chessboard now. This wasn't prison. This was slavery with uniforms. The peace summit. Inside the chapel. He did something no man at Wayross had done before. He called a meeting. Inside the prison chapel, neutral ground, 9 stood in front of shot callers from every gang. Lil Rock from the Crips, OG Smoke from the Bloods, Red from the GDs, Hassan from the Muslims, and Killer Z from the Ghostface set. All of them walked intense, armed, eyes wild. 9 stood alone, no vest, no fear. "I ain't your op," he started. "Your op wears green, carries a badge, and runs bets on your body like this a dogfight." They stared, waiting. "They using y'all like pawns, bleeding y'all for sport. You kill each other, they laugh. You die, they profit." OG Smoke narrowed his eyes. "Why you care?" "Because I don't like being used," 9 said, voice sharp. "And I damn sure don't like being bet on, like I'm some pit bull." Killer Z stood up, towering. "So what? We hold hands now?" "No," 9 replied. "You hold your position, but you don't crash. You don't spin unless it's worth it. We stop being entertainment." Red from the GDs nodded. "You got a plan?" "Yeah. Peace." Silence. Then Lil Rock said, "Who gonna enforce it?" From the back, a voice said, "I will." "Enter the source." He walked in with slow, calculated steps. A blood, tatted, with eyes like still water, but his energy was different. Calm, coiled, dangerous. They called him the Source, because nobody knew where he came from, but once he moved, the whole yard reacted. He wore no flag, just black thermals, low-cut hair, and precision. He was the only man in Wayross who dropped bodies with his hands alone. He didn't shank, he struck. Because the Source wasn't just a killer, he was a master of Wing Chun, a Chinese martial art known for brutal efficiency. Quick strikes, close quarters, no wasted motion. They said he once disarmed 3 men in a laundry room with nothing but a bar of soap. Now he stood behind 9. "I ain't no leader," he said. "But if peace gets me more sleep, I'll enforce it." No one challenged him. The change within 2 weeks, violence dropped 70% in the compound. No more sudden stabbings, no more setups. The COs started noticing. And the warden, he wasn't pleased, because the death pool was drying up. His games were losing money. And the man responsible, 9. Warden's office, midnight warden. Greeley sat at his desk, fuming, a bottle of bourbon half empty, a chalkboard of tally marks behind him, each one a score from the past few months. Bloods, Crips, Ghostface, each with bets made and lost. Now, silence, no action, just one name in red chalk across the top. Jones. "Make it look like an accident," he told his lieutenant. "I want his body found before breakfast." Wayross Prison, C2 Yard, 6:42 p.m. The sky was low, dipped in Georgia dusk. The yard wasn't loud, just tension in the air. The kind that buzzes in your skin before lightning strikes. Inmates moved like shadows. COs watched from towers with disinterest. And 9? He stood near the pull-up bar, wiping sweat from his forehead. Shirt off, senses sharp. He felt it before he saw it. The setup 2 men approached, 2 casual. C. Raw, a heavy-hitting boxer from Jersey, stood 6 feet 8 inches, built like a tank, knuckles permanently bruised. Known for knocking men out with body shots that made them spit blood. Beside him walked Troy Major, a small-framed Jamaican killer with a razor tucked inside his gums. Silent, calculated. Known for slicing jugulars so smooth, the victim didn't know they were dead until the air left them. This wasn't coincidence. This was a hit. The smoke in the mirror. C. Raw smiled, fake warmth layered in menace. "You good, King?" he asked, walking up slow, casual-like. Anybody else would have answered back, would have taken the bait, would have caught the blade. But Nine wasn't built like most. He caught the tone in the words, like smoke hiding fire. He didn't respond. He reacted. The bow as Wayross stepped in, Troy started to flank. Nine ducked low on instinct, spinning left with a vicious upward elbow that cracked Troy's jaw before the blade ever left his lips. The Jamaican staggered back, stunned by the contact and the fact that he never even got to make a move. But the real show was behind him. The death blow. Nobody saw the source coming, not even Nine. One moment the space was clear. The next, he appeared like death with a purpose, walking silently, then striking once. A short punch, a blur, not flashy, just final. His fist slammed into Wayross's chest, a Wing Chun power punch, so fast and direct it looked fake. But the result was death in motion. Wayross's eyes bulged. He gasped. Then his massive frame collapsed in on itself, as if a tree had been chopped at the base. The blow had crushed his heart so completely. His spine arched and cracked, and he fell face first onto the concrete like a demolished monument. Blood pooled. The yard froze. The aftermath, Nine stood breathing hard, face cut from Troy's wild swing, but eyes cold. Troy was on the ground, moaning, jaw broken, blood dripping onto the yard. The source stood over Wayross's lifeless body, hands still clenched, breathing slow. He didn't look at Nine. He didn't need to. Nine finally exhaled. That Wing Chun shit. That was something else. The source replied quietly. Close range. Close casket. Back in the tower, Warden Greeley watched from a dark corner of the upper tier. He crushed his bourbon glass in his hand. "So that's how you want to play it, Jones," he muttered. "Then it's war." Chapter 6, The Warden's Revenge, 5K.1, Killer by Deshaun Jones. Wayross Prison. The morning after. The air was thick with rumors. Wayross was dead. Troy Major was in medical with a wired jaw and 60 stitches inside his mouth. The yard was locked down. But Nine knew the real problem wasn't the lockdown. The real problem was Warden Greeley. In a place like Wayross, killing another inmate was one thing. Killing the warden's hitter was another. Wayross wasn't just a boxer. He was Greeley's insurance policy. A man he could point like a weapon whenever he needed balance shifted. Now he was gone, and Nine's name wasn't whispered anymore. It was stamped in blood. Warden's office. 8:14 a.m. Greeley sat in his leather chair, a bandage on his palm from smashing his bourbon glass the night before. Across from him were 3 of his most loyal officers, Captain Barnett, Lieutenant Cobb, and Officer Rayburn. "This ain't about discipline," Greeley said. "This is about showing everybody what happens when you kill my man." Barnett grinned. "We talking beat down." Greeley shook his head. "Number beatings don't send messages anymore. We're gonna make it look like Jones incited a race riot. We'll write it up clean. Cameras will malfunction. When it's over, there'll be 2 bags going to the coroner, Jones and his little kung fu friend." Rayburn cracked his knuckles. "You want riot gear?" Greeley smirked. "Bring the whole damn armory." Dorm 3, C. Noon. The source sat cross-legged on his bunk, hands on his knees, eyes closed. His breathing was slow, steady, the calm before something violent. Nine leaned against the wall, watching the window slot. "They comin'," Nine said. The source didn't open his eyes. "We knew they would. The question is how far they'll go." Nine smirked. "All the way." They both heard it then. the muffled clanking of shields and boots in the hallway. Miss Lane's warning. The door buzzed. Miss Lane slipped inside, closing it behind her. She was breathing hard, hair pulled back tighter than usual. "They're about to move on you," she said quickly. "Full squad, riot gear, batons, gas. They're staging it so they can say y'all started a racial war." 9 stepped closer. "How you know?" "I heard Greeley giving orders in the admin wing. He wants you dead before count." The source opened his eyes. "Then they'll have to earn it." Lane shook her head. "Listen to me. They're not playing fair. They're cutting the lights and jamming the doors so you can't run to the yard. By the time they're done, you'll either be in medical or the morgue." 9's jaw flexed. "So what you want me to do? Hide?" "I'm telling you to survive," she said sharply. "I've already made a call to a civil rights lawyer I know in Atlanta. If you make it through tonight, there's a chance I can get eyes on this place. But if you're dead, the story dies with you." 9 stared at her for a long second. Then he nodded once. "Do what you gotta do." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I can stall them for a few minutes. After that, you're on your own." The lights go out. The hum of the fluorescent stopped. Darkness swallowed Dorm 3C. Then came the sound. Boots on concrete, shields locking, the clatter of batons on metal. The source cracked his neck. "Ready?" 9 smiled in the dark. "Always." The door clicked. The first shield came through, and the war began. First contact. The door banged open, shield first, black and clear, with a steel edge. Behind it, Barnett, swinging his baton like he wanted to crush bone. 2 more COs flanked him, and 2 more came behind with zip ties and gas canisters. Barnett's voice roared in the dark. "Lock down, He didn't finish. 9 stepped left, letting the shield rush past him, and drove his shoulder into the side of the first CO's knee. Bone cracked. The man screamed, buckling into the darkness. At the same time, the source moved like a whisper, sliding past Barnett's shield, stepping inside his swing. His hands became a blur, 3 rapid-fire punches to the chest, 1 to the throat, and then a palm strike so fast and precise, Barnett's helmet snapped back like he'd been shot. Barnett dropped, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Chaos in the dark. The second wave tried to flood in, but 9 grabbed the downed CO's shield, spinning it into the doorway like a barricade. Gas canisters clanked to the floor, but couldn't roll in. A baton swung blindly toward him. He caught it with both hands, yanked the officer forward, and slammed his forehead into the man's visor. Glass cracked. Blood sprayed inside the mask. The source had 2 COs on him now, both swinging like street brawlers in armor. He weaved inside their range, deflecting every blow with small, precise motions. Wing Chun wasn't flashy, it was surgical. He trapped one man's wrist, stepped in close, and hammered an elbow into his jaw, the sound dull and final. The other tried to grab him, Source's fist fired once, straight into the solar plexus. The man dropped to his knees, gagging. Miss Lane's move. In the control booth, Miss Lane worked fast. She cut the outer door locks to the dorm, forcing the riot squad's backup to run the long way around. Then she called the lieutenant's radio with a false report. Fight in the laundry room. Multiple injuries. Half the response team peeled off. Back in 3C, it was now just 9, the source, and 3 downed COs. The message 9 stood over Barnett, who was clutching his throat. He leaned down close enough for only him to hear. You tell Greeley, next time he sends men to kill me, he better send all of them. The source stepped beside him, looking down at the rest of the squad groaning on the floor. His voice was calm, almost bored. "This was defense," he said. "Next time, it'll be war." Aftermath. By the time the backup finally arrived, Nine and the Source were already sitting back on their bunks, calm, breathing steady. Barnett and the others were carried out on stretchers. No one could prove what happened in the dark, but everyone in Wayross knew. And Warden Greeley, he wasn't done. Chapter 7, Peace Before the Storm, 5K.1, Killer by Deshaun Jones. Wayross Prison. 6 weeks later, the air in Wayross felt different. No more whispers of planned yard accidents. No more late-night boots stomping toward Dorm 3C. The war had ended without a single shank being drawn. And it wasn't because the gangs got soft. It was because the warden fell. The fall of Greeley. The story broke on the local news first. Grainy photos, leaked memos, and the anonymous testimony of a female corrections officer, Miss Lane, exposing how Warden Greeley had orchestrated a fake race riot and tried to have 2 inmates killed under cover of lockdown. Within 48 hours, the Department of Corrections had reassigned him to an office job in the Northern District. By the end of the week, he was gone completely. Wayross ran smoother without him. Months of peace. For months, the compound was still. Nine could walk the yard without scanning for ambushes every 10 steps. The Source kept training soldiers quietly in Wing Chun, not for war but for discipline. Miss Lane's visits to Dorm 3C became more frequent. Sometimes she'd pass him notes hidden inside law books. Other times, she'd slip into the library during her rounds, lingering just long enough for their hands to touch under the desk. Something like love. It was never supposed to happen. She was CO. He was inmate. But somewhere between smuggling intel, dodging death squads, and planning yard politics, they'd found something different. Something that made the walls fade. In the quiet corners of the library, their conversations stopped being about business. "How many years you got left?" she asked one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. "Too many," Nine said. "But I ain't counting days no more. I'm counting moves." She smirked. "What's the next one?" He looked at her. "Freedom. For real this time." The new warden. When Warden Henry Cole took over, everyone expected a return to chaos. But Cole was sharp, less about ego, more about politics. He knew Nine's influence kept the yard balanced, and in a move nobody saw coming, he called Nine into his office one warm Friday morning. "I've reviewed your record," Cole said. "Your infractions are strategic, not reckless. You've done more to stabilize this prison than half my staff, so I'm recommending you for parole." Nine's eyes narrowed. "That easy?" Cole leaned back. "Don't mistake my decision for kindness, Jones. You're too powerful to stay here. The balance tips too far in your favor, and I don't like owing inmates anything." Nine smiled slightly. "Fair enough." The day of release. 3 weeks later, Nine stepped out of Wayross Prison's main gates with a small plastic property bag in one hand and the sun hitting his face like a foreign language. Miss Lane was waiting in the staff parking lot, sunglasses on, trying not to cry. They stood there, 2 people who'd survived a war they weren't supposed to win. "I told you I'd see you free," she said. Nine stepped close, kissed her quick and deep. "I told you I'd make it." She smiled. "So what now?" Before he could answer, the low growl of black SUVs cut across the moment. The trap 4 men in dark suits stepped out. The lead one flipped a badge. "Timothy Jones, you are now in federal custody. Conspiracy to traffic cocaine across state lines. You know the rest." Miss Lane's face fell as they cuffed him. "No, no, this ain't right," she yelled, stepping toward the agents. "He's paroled. You can't just... One agent turned to her coldly. Ma'am, the state of Georgia doesn't outrank the United States of America. 9 didn't fight, didn't speak, just looked at her one last time. Don't wait on me, he said softly. They shoved him into the back of the SUV. She stood frozen as the convoy pulled away, her hands shaking, sunglasses hiding tears. The peace was over, and the storm was just beginning. Chapter 8. Welcome to the Feds. 5K.1. Killer by Deshaun Jones. Black SUV. Unknown OT9 had done years in the state. He knew the game there, the rhythm of the yard, the politics, the CO hustles, the slow grind of time. The Feds. This was different. The agents didn't say a word, no threats, no speeches, not even a warning. They just drove, black sunglasses reflecting the Georgia highways, their hands resting near pistols like it was muscle memory. 9 sat cuffed in the back, silent, his mind replaying Miss Lane's face at the gate. Atlanta Airport. The convoy. When the SUVs turned into the Atlanta Airport tarmac, 9's eyebrows lifted. He expected a prison drop-off. Instead, there was an entire fleet of law enforcement vehicles lined up like a military operation. Black SUVs, transport vans, buses, some with tinted windows, some with bars over the glass. Uniformed agents were everywhere, herding prisoners like cattle, moving them in chains toward a massive white jet with JPATS stenciled on the side. The Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System. Con Air. The plane inside. The setup was nothing like commercial flights. Metal benches lined the sides, but in the very front, there were small steel cells built into the cabin for the worst of the worst. Shot callers. Killers. Men you didn't even let breathe the same air as regular population without precautions. There were women too, shackled and seated separately. As 9 boarded, his eyes scanned everything. Seatbelts on steel benches. COs strapped with tasers and beanbag shotguns. And the faint, metallic smell of cold steel and sweat. Call and response. The hum of the engines barely started before a voice came from one of the front cells. 020. It was a code, the first number call. 021, another inmate barked from the benches. It moved like a chain reaction down the row, each man calling his number in order. 9 glanced down at his own shirt, 020, and when his turn came, he answered, 020. From the steel cell, the voice called back. You, Georgia? Yeah, 9 said, leaning forward. There was a pause, then. Find Willie Falcon and protect him with your life. Landing. 2 hours later, the plane descended. But instead of a standard terminal, it rolled straight into a massive hangar. As soon as the doors opened, armed COs moved fast, barking orders. Chains clinked as prisoners were rushed out into a massive building that looked like something out of ancient Rome. Tiered walkways, echoing voices, and a circle of open space in the middle like a coliseum. And already, the lines were forming. The separation, it was automatic. White inmates drifted to one side, Mexicans to another. Blacks gathered in small knots, sizing each other up. 9 found Willie Falcon easily, an older Cuban, thin but sharp-eyed, moving slow in the crowd. 9 stepped in behind him without a word, scanning the room. That's when the doors on the top tier opened. A big, light-skinned young dude stepped out from one of the secure boxes, flanked by 10 others, all tatted and grim. Down south, boys. They walked with a purpose, and it was straight toward Willie. The warning before they could reach, the police stepped in. This is a USP, the lead CO shouted. If your paperwork ain't right, or you're with the wrong car, you follow me to lockdown now. couple of inmates peeled off quickly, keeping their heads down. 9 thought maybe that was it. He was wrong. The war begins. The second the main doors closed, the atmosphere snapped. A yell erupted from the Mexican side, and suddenly they were producing weapons from nowhere. 9's eyes widened. They were pulling knives from their own bodies, hidden deep, wrapped, smuggled inside. One man squatted low, reached between his legs, and came up with a blade the size of a kitchen knife, already gleaming under the overhead lights. Then they moved. Fast. Straight into the opposing line of Mexican inmates, the Sureños. It was chaos instantly. Steel-slashed skin. Men were screaming, swinging, stabbing. Blood splattered across the concrete. 9 yanked Willie behind him, watching the madness like a movie he didn't buy a ticket for. 2 guards rushed in, spraying OC gas and firing beanbags, then dragged out the first 2 bodies. 5 minutes later, they had to do it again. Later, back in his temporary cell, 9 sat on the lower bunk, processing what he'd just walked into. A CO passed by, chuckling. "Welcome to USP McCreary, Georgia boy. MS-13 runs this camp, and they don't like the Sureños." 9 leaned back against the wall, jaw tightening. The state was checkers. The feds, this was war chess with blood for pieces. Chapter 8, Welcome to the Feds, continued. 5K.1 Killer by Deshaun Jones. USP McCreary. The move to the unit. After the chaos in the intake hall, 9 was assigned his housing. The CO tossed him a folded slip of paper like it was nothing. Cell 237. 9 didn't know much about federal politics yet, but he quickly noticed something. Every man in the unit wore their car on their sleeve. State, gang, region. And Georgia? Georgia wasn't represented here. The smart move, according to the feds, would have been to flag the CO, request separate housing, and take a trip to the hole until they could find him a safe spot. But 9, that wasn't in him. Going to the hole without swinging was a chump move. The knock, he made his way to 237, chains in his steps but his face calm. When he got there, he didn't hesitate. He banged on the steel like he owned it. The door swung open. 2 big Indians stepped out, their skin inked from shoulders to wrists, braids hanging down their backs, eyes flat and unreadable. They looked 9 up and down, like they were scanning for the punchline. "My papers say this my cell," 9 explained, voice even, ready for whatever. For a moment they said nothing. Then they smiled. And just like that, it looked like 30 Indians materialized out of nowhere, stepping out of cells, coming down the tier, all standing on one side, watching. The call from down the range came a voice like rolling thunder. "Georgia boy, you crazy!" 9 turned to see a wild-looking dude with a full black beard, long hair tied back, and shoulders wide enough to block the tier. He looked more like a bear than a man, and he walked with the slow confidence of someone who'd never been checked. He stopped a few feet away, grinning. "You just gonna walk up in here like that?" 9 shrugged. "I just ain't going to no hole. That's not my style." The man chuckled, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Give me your paperwork." The Czech 9 handed over his PSI report, the pre-sentence investigation document that spelled out his case, charges, and history. About 10 of the prisoners followed the bearded man into a nearby cell. The door shut. 9 stood in the middle of the tier, 30 pairs of eyes on him, the sound of muffled voices inside the cell. 5 minutes later, the door opened. They came out smiling. Big O, the bearded man, stepped forward, PSI still in his hand. "My name's Big O," he said. "I usually don't take no cellmates, but your paperwork look good, real good." He handed 9 back the file and clapped a massive hand on his shoulder. "You can move in." The tension broke. Laughter rolled down the tier. The prisoners nodded at him as if he'd passed some invisible test. 9 moved into 207, but in his head, he knew. This wasn't just luck. This was survival in the feds. Your paperwork was your life. And for the first time in a long while, 9 had a feeling Big O might be more than just a cellie. First night in 207. The cell was bigger than most, but still small enough to feel like a box. 2 bunks, a steel desk, a sink, a toilet, all bolted into the concrete like they'd been there since the Cold War. Big O sat on the bottom bunk, elbows on his knees, looking straight at 9. "You ever done time in the feds before?" he asked. 9 shook his head. "State only." Big O grunted. "Then listen close, 'cause this ain't the state. This ain't about who the hardest or who got the most bodies. This is about cars." "The cars, in the feds," Big O explained. "Everybody rides with a car. Your car is your state or your gang. If you ain't with your car, you with nobody, and nobody is a death sentence here. Georgia got 1 car. We ain't big like Cali or Texas, so we stick tight. If one of us go to war, we all go to war." 9 nodded. "So who's running this yard?" Big O leaned back. "This is USP McCreary. This camp is an MS-13 stronghold. The Serenos? They're here too, but they outnumbered. Mexicans fight Mexicans here. Whites stick with their politics. Woods, Peckerwoods, AB. The blacks? We got cars for DC, Chi-Town, Cali, and us, the southern car. Everybody got their lane, but lanes cross when it's business." "Business, business," 9 repeated. Big O smirked. "Dope, phones, gambling. The COs run half of it. The inmates run the other half, and we tax everything that touches our car. If it ain't taxed, it's taken. If you ain't part of a car, you pay rent for breathing." 9 leaned forward. "And if you don't pay?" Big O's face didn't change. "Then your car sends a message, in blood." The current war. "Right now," Big O said, lowering his voice, "the yard's on edge. MS-13 and the Serenos been at it heavy. The whites are staying neutral for now, but they watching. We stay out of Mexican politics, unless it bleeds into our side of the yard. But make no mistake, you get caught in one of their storms. Don't expect nobody to pull you out unless you part of the mission." 9 absorbed every word. In the state, politics were personal. Here, they were mechanical, calculated. "The first move, you got 2 jobs now," Big O said, pointing at him. 1, keep your name clean. No fights you can't win, no debt you can't pay. 2, learn the flow of this place. Who moves what, who talks to who can be flipped. You see something the Georgia car can eat off, you bring it to me. That's how you get stripes here." 9 leaned back on the bunk. "And what if I see something I want for myself?" Big O's eyes narrowed. Then he smiled. "Then you better move fast and make sure I get my cut." Lights out. When the lights clicked off, 9 lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The state had been survival. The feds, this was strategy. And now he had a seat in the shot caller's cell, which meant he had access, but also a target on his back. 2 weeks in, yard wreck. By his second week in McCreary, 9 had already memorized the yard's rhythm. When the guards rotated, which corners had blind spots, which cliques controlled the basketball court, and which cars ran the track. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for opportunity, and he found it by accident. The spot. It was mid-afternoon, and 9 was posted near the pull-up bars, pretending to stretch while his eyes did the work. The Serenos always moved in 3s. 2 on the yard, 1 disappearing for 15 minutes at a time into the vocational building, then back out with the same neutral face. Most people wouldn't think twice. But 9 had run way too long not to recognize a pattern. The one going inside was skinny, quiet, never talking to other Mexicans. His job wasn't muscle, his job was mule work. And from the way he walked coming back, shoulders slightly hunched, arms stiff like he was guarding his ribs, 9 knew he was moving something. The confirmation. That night in the cell, 9 brought it up. "You know that little Sereno with the spiderweb tattoo on his neck?" 9 asked Big O. Big O looked up from his book. "Yeah, that's Chivo. Why?" "He's carrying in and out of Vok twice a day, same time. He don't talk to nobody in between, and he moves like he's strapped, but not with steel." Big O's eyes narrowed. "Phones or dope?" "My money's on both." The play Big O leaned back, thinking. "We don't step on Mexican business unless it touches us." 9 smirked. "What if I told you it's already touching us?" Big O closed the book slowly. "Go on." 9 explained that Chivo's route cut right past the laundry, the one spot Georgia boys controlled during that shift. If they timed it, they could have a man bump into Chivo, lift the package clean, and have it back in 2:07 before Chivo even realized it was gone. The test Big O stared at 9 for a long moment. "You setting this up?" "Yeah," 9 said, "but if it goes bad, I take the weight." Big O smiled. "You're learning fast." The move. The next afternoon, the trap was set. T-Baby, one of Georgia's heavy hitters, accidentally stumbled into Chivo coming out of vocational. The bump was clean, a shoulder to chest, quick apology, keep walking. In the same motion, T-Baby slipped the package, wrapped in plastic and tape, under his shirt and into the laundry. By the time Chivo realized something was wrong, Tank was folding towels like nothing happened. The count. Back in 2:07, Big O unwrapped the score. 2 ounces of crystal meth, 1 flip phone, 1 micro SD card full of numbers. Big O whistled low. "This right here just paid your rent for the year." 9 just nodded. "Told you I wasn't here to sit still." The lesson. Big O leaned in. "You did good, but here's the rule. You don't just take from another car. You make sure the debt works in your favor. Sereno's gonna come looking for this. We'll give it back, for a price." 9 smirked. "And if they don't pay?" Big O's grin was cold. "Then we make an example." Lights out. That night, 9 lay in his bunk knowing one thing. In the feds, moves made you money, but they also made you enemies. And after today, both his bank and his threat list had just gotten bigger. Chapter 10. White Lightning and Blood, 5K.1, Killer by Deshaun Jones. USP McCreary, 2:07. By his 3rd month in McCreary, Neen had learned 2 things. In the feds, the hustle wasn't just dope and phones. It was everything people craved but couldn't get. And Big O, he had every angle covered. The White Lightning hustle. Big O's cell smelled faintly of corn mash and bleach sometimes, a smell that made other inmates grin. He had the art of homebrew liquor perfected. He called it White Lightning, clear, sharp, and deadly smooth. The skinheads and Nazis loved it the most. They paid top dollar, stamps, commissary, even jewelry, just for a pint. Big O didn't care about their politics, he cared about their money. It kept the Georgia Cars store fat and the respect even fatter. The Vegas of the feds. But Big O's real moneymaker was the parlay tickets. In the feds, gambling was king, and sports betting ran every season. Big O's tickets weren't some sloppy yard hustle, they were mathematically perfect. He taught 9 how to power rate games, how to move a point spread a half point at a time to keep the bets even and guarantee profit. This ain't about picking winners, Big O told him. It's about controlling the action. Bookies in Vegas wish they could do what we doing. Nine soaked it in. By week 2, he was moving tickets like a seasoned bookmaker. The arrival of Kiki things were running smooth until Kiki came in, a BMF member from Georgia. At first, everyone welcomed him in under the Georgia car. He had swagger, he had commissary, and he had a mouth that stayed running. But Big O always checked paperwork. Always. When Kiki's PSI finally came through, it was bad, real bad. Not only was he cooperating, he'd been the main witness in a state-to-Fed pipeline case that buried 2 men for life. The hole and the return. Big O gave him the courtesy most wouldn't. He told Kiki straight, "You can walk to the hole, or you can get stabbed on the yard." Kiki went to the hole, but 2 months later, he came back. Only now, he was under the DC car. The DC car DC was the most populated car in the feds. Why? Because every crime in the District of Columbia was federal. That meant their shooters, robbers, and hitters all ended up in BOP custody. The DC car moved deep, and Kiki was sitting with them in the TV area, laughing like it was all good. The stabbing Big O didn't yell, didn't warn. He just walked, straight through the middle of 30 DC soldiers, and went right to Kiki. Without breaking stride, Big O pulled the steel and started stabbing him in the chest and side over and over. Kiki screamed for help, his voice bouncing off the concrete. "DC, y'all ain't gonna do nothing. Help me." Not one DC soldier moved. The reason later, in the shower hall, Fish, the DC shot caller, told Big O why. "Kiki gave us 100 racks for protection," Fish said. "But that money don't mean shit if he's a snitch. If y'all from Georgia went for it, cool. But I ain't risking none of my soldiers' lives for no rat." Big O just nodded, water running off his beard. That's the only answer I needed. Nine's lesson. That night in 207, Nine understood the federal creed on a different level. It didn't matter how much money you had, who you knew, or how deep your crew was. In the feds, your paperwork was life or death. And a rat died alone. USP McCreary, late summer yard. The sky was hot and heavy, the kind of air that made you sweat just by breathing. The yard was full, weights clanging, basketball courts packed, groups posted in their corners. Nine was leaning on the pull-up bar, eyes scanning as always. The Mexican cars were out in force, MS-13 on one side of the yard, Serenos on the other, both deep, both armed in their own ways. Big O had warned him a week earlier. "When them two crash, you stay out the way, unless it comes to you. But if it does come to you, you better make it count." The spark. It started small. 2 Serenos walked past the MS-13 weight pit, talking loud in Spanish. One of them bumped shoulders with a young MS-13 soldier. Accident or not, it didn't matter. The younger MS-13 didn't swing, but an older homie did. A blade flashed in the sunlight, fast as a blink. Blood sprayed the concrete. The split-second decision. The yard exploded. Men from both cars rushed toward each other, knives coming out from every hidden spot, shoe soles, waistbands, even pulled from mouths. The Georgia car was posted on the bench area. The whites were moving toward the gate, wanting no part of it. The DC car watched from the basketball court, not jumping in but alert. Nine started to step back, the smart move, until he saw 3 Serenos break off from the fight and start coming toward the Georgia side. The clash. "Yo, they comin'!" one of the Georgia boys yelled. The first Sereno swung wild, aiming low. Nine stepped inside, caught his wrist, and drove an elbow into his jaw, hard enough to drop him cold. The second came from the side. 9 pivoted, using the same Wing Chun trap the source once showed him, jamming the man's knife arm and slamming a knee into his ribs until he dropped the blade. The third never reached him. Big O caught him mid-stride and flattened him with a shot to the temple. The guard response. Sirens wailed. The gun tower boomed with the warning shot. A real 2-2-3 round cracking the air. Guards flooded the yard with shields and batons, barking orders. Everyone hit the ground, except one MS-13 and one Sereno still locked in a knife struggle. 2 beanbag rounds ended that fight. Aftermath in the hole. They snatched 9, Big O, and 3 other Georgia members for investigation. In the hole, Big O was calm, even smiling. See, that's why I told you to watch the yard. In here, your war might not be your war. Till it is. 9 nodded, replaying the source's training in his head. Without those lessons, he'd have bled today. Back on the compound, when they got back to the yard 3 weeks later, the politics had shifted. The Mexicans knew Georgia wouldn't fold. The MS-13 shot caller gave 9 a nod on the way past. The Serenos gave him space. And Big O? He didn't say it out loud, but 9 could tell. His stock just went up USP McCreary. The hustle grows by fall. The Georgia car wasn't just holding its own. It was thriving. Big O had 2 main hustles rolling smooth. White Lightning, his homebrew operation, steady supply line from kitchen workers to tier distribution. Parlay tickets, sports betting so tight, the books always came out ahead. 9 wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was running the tickets, breaking down point spreads, reading injury reports, and moving action from car to car. It wasn't about gambling. It was about control. If you wanted in on the big bets, you came through Georgia. The CO plug. Every big hustle in the feds needed a CO plug, someone to bring in the extras and look the other way. For Georgia, that was Officer Reynolds, mid-30s, fresh divorce, gambling habit he couldn't feed on a CO paycheck. He started with small favors, extra sugar for the brew, bringing in legal pads for ticket slips. But soon, he was sliding in phone chargers, rolling papers, even sealed bags of yeast. 9 never dealt with him directly. Big O kept that wall up, but Reynolds knew exactly who the Georgia bookkeeper was. The slip. It was a Tuesday morning count when the slip happened. Reynolds was coming in on the 7 to 3 shift, carrying a kitchen box to the officer's station. Nothing unusual, except SIS, Special Investigative Services, was already in the unit, randomly searching lockers. When Reynolds saw them, his face froze. 9 caught it instantly from across the tier. The shakedown, by noon, the search had spread. Cells were tossed. Lockers flipped. In 207, they found nothing. Big O kept everything moving, never letting product sit in one place for more than a day. But down in the laundry room, SIS hit gold. 3 gallons of mash, a stack of betting slips, and a half-burned notebook with game spreads written in 9's handwriting. The interrogation. They pulled 9 to the lieutenant's office. 2 SIS investigators sat across from him, one tapping a pen, the other just staring. "Jones," the tapper said, "you think we don't know you're running the tickets?" 9 leaned back in his chair. "I don't even gamble." The stare guy smirked. "We've got your handwriting, your numbers, your CO bringing in ingredients for your shot caller." 9 didn't blink. "You got a CO problem, not a me problem." Back in 2007, when they dropped him back in the cell, Big O was waiting. "They bite?" "Nah," 9 said. "They fishing." Big O grinned. "Good. Let 'em fish. We'll change the bait." That night they switched up the entire system. new drop points, coded slips, runners who didn't even know who they were running for. The Lesson 9 learned something from that SIS scare. In the feds, it wasn't the gangs that would end you. It was the eyes you couldn't see, the ones with badges, clipboards, and the power to make you disappear into the hole without laying a hand on you. USP McCreary, SIS office 2 weeks later. SIS didn't let go. If they suspected you, they circled you like vultures. They didn't rush. They didn't make noise. They just kept watching, quietly building a case. And Officer Reynolds, he was feeling the walls closing in. The squeeze. They pulled him into the SIS office after his shift. It wasn't a casual talk. The door was locked. The recorder was running. "Reynolds, we've got you on camera making multiple unscheduled stops on your tier runs," Investigator Martin said, sliding photos across the table. Each one showed Reynolds handing something small to an inmate, sometimes just a folded piece of paper, other times a baggie. "You're looking at conspiracy to introduce contraband into a federal facility. That's a felony," the second agent added. Reynolds swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." Martin leaned in. "We can take your badge today, or you can work with us. Give us names. Tell us who's running it, and maybe this disappears." The crack. At first, Reynolds held out, but by the third meeting, he started talking. In pieces. He didn't say Big O or 9 directly. He called them the Georgia car. He described where they sat in the chow hall, which runners came to their cell, which drop spots got the most traffic. He even gave SIS the name of the inmate who coded the betting slips. It wasn't a confession yet, but it was a roadmap. Back in 2007, Big O got wind of it before SIS could make a move. One of George's kitchen workers overheard Reynolds in the officers' lounge, talking too freely after a couple of shots of white lightning he confiscated. That same night, Big O called a meeting in the shower hall, water running, noise bouncing off the tiles. "Reynolds is leaking," Big O said, his voice low. "SIS is squeezing him, and he's starting to point." 9 didn't flinch. "So we cut him off." Big O shook his head. "Too late for that. His mouth already moving. We gotta move the whole operation before they tie it to us." The clean house operation. By the next morning, every piece of contraband the Georgia car controlled was gone. Mash barrels were dismantled and flushed. Betting slips were burned in the metal shop furnace. The drop spots were scrubbed clean. They even sent a fake tip to SIS about a New York parlay ring running out of the Unicorn factory, giving the investigators something shiny to chase. The fallout. A week later, Reynolds was reassigned to a different unit. Rumor was SIS never got the big bust they wanted, but the Georgia car knew the truth. They dodged a bullet because they'd moved before the net closed. 9's takeaway that night. 9 sat on his bunk thinking about the lesson. In the feds, your enemies didn't always come with knives. Sometimes they came with keys, badges, and the power to say your name in the right ear. And when they did, you had to be faster than their story. USP McCreary, Yard Day. The rec yard was moving like usual. Shot callers posted up in their corners, handball slapping on the wall, weight pile clanking in the back. 9 and Big O were on their bench, scanning the yard, when the doors from receiving and discharge opened. 10 new inmates walked out in the standard khaki, all looking around, all trying to figure out the landscape. 9 wasn't paying much attention, until he saw the third man in line. Recognition. Short, thick-built, bald head shining under the sun, walking like the ground owed him money. 9 froze. No way. Big O glanced over. You know him? That's Bear, Nine said, a grin forming. Larry Short, Elizabeth Cant housing, childhood friend, true hustler, one of the best gamblers I ever seen. Bear spotted him almost the same moment. His serious face broke into a grin, and he started cutting through the yard without hesitation, ignoring the silent rules about where you could walk. The embrace. They hugged hard, laughing like they were on the block again. Man, they finally got you, Nine said. They've been trying for years, Bear replied. Feds hit me with a conspiracy and gambling case, but you know me. I was making too much noise. They had to shut me down. Instant shift word traveled fast. Within an hour, every major car knew Bear was on the yard, and more importantly, that he was tied to Nine. Bear wasn't just a gambler. He was a money magnet. In the feds, that meant commissary moving, debts getting paid, and side hustles booming. Big O saw it immediately. Your boy just raised our stock, he said to Nine. But we gotta move smart. Feds hate when too much money moves through one car. Bear's setup. By day 3, Bear was in cell 207 with Nine and Big O. He was already sketching out a betting board on a legal pad, calculating odds faster than some dudes could count to 10. We'll run it clean, Bear said. No slips on the tier. All bets verbal, payouts on store day. Keep the SISIs off us. Nine just smiled. Welcome to the Georgia car, Bear. The Ripple Bear's arrival didn't just bring opportunity, it brought jealousy. From the other side of the yard, Fish from the DC car was watching, calculating. Bear had history with some East Coast shot callers, and not all of it was friendly. In McCreary, money drew attention, and attention was dangerous. The hustle picks up 2 weeks after Bear landed. The yard economy had shifted. His parlay tickets were running smoother than anything McCreary had seen. Odds were set clean, payouts were tight, and the book stayed balanced. It wasn't Vegas, it was better. Everyone knew the Georgia car controlled it, and the commissary flow was getting heavy. But heavy money brings heavy problems. The spark. It started over a basketball game. Georgia versus DC on the yard court. High energy, trash talk flying, and a lot of side bets riding on the outcome. DC's team was favored by 3 points, but Georgia came out hot. By halftime, the spread flipped. Bear adjusted the live odds, something he only did when a game was too lopsided. It was fair, it was smart. But to DC, it looked like Georgia was protecting their own. The confrontation after the game, Georgia won by 7. Fish, the DC shot caller, walked right up to Bear with 3 of his soldiers. You know you messed up my line, right? Fish said. Bear didn't flinch. The line moved. Everybody saw it. That's how betting works. Nah, Fish said, shaking his head. That's how you work. Georgia got all the control, all the payouts, and DC ain't seeing a cut. That ends now. Big O steps in before Bear could respond. Big O was there, flanked by 9 and 2 more Georgia hitters. You got a problem with the line, Big O said. You bring it to me. Not my man. Fish smirked. I'm bringing it to you now. My problem is the money. You running it like the feds can't snatch all that commissary tomorrow. You worried about the feds, Big O said. You shouldn't be betting. The tension, the 2 shot callers stared each other down. Neither moved. In McCreary, this was the point where somebody either swung or walked away. Fish broke first. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Enjoy your run, O. But you know this yard. Nothing stays sweet forever. He turned and walked, his crew falling in behind him. 9 watched them go. He didn't like the way DC's younger soldiers were looking at them. 9's instinct later that night, 9 told Big O. That wasn't the end of it. Fish is gonna wait for the right time to make a move. He's patient, and a patient man in here is worse than one ready to crash. Big O nodded. Then we watch closer, and we keep Bear out of sight until this cools down. But deep down, 9 knew, in a place like McCreary, things didn't cool down. They boiled over. The warning signs, in the feds, trouble didn't always come loud. Sometimes it came quiet, a few words in the wrong ear, a look held too long at chow. 9 had been feeling it since the yard incident with Fish. That kind of tension didn't just fade. It hid in shadows, waiting for a moment. Bear didn't scare easy. Growing up in the Elizabeth Cant housing projects, he'd been hustling since before he could shave. Big money, big dice games. He knew pressure. But the feds were different. Here, it wasn't just about being tough. It was about surviving men who lived to kill. The setup. It was just before final lockdown. Most cells were already closed. The unit was quiet except for the shuffle of last-minute movement. A few late stragglers heading in before the doors clanged for the night. 9 and Big O were leaning on the bars of their cell, watching the floor below. That's when Crazy Kid made his move. Crazy Kid was one of DC's crash dummies, young, reckless, and fearless, the kind of soldier you wind up in the hole or the grave behind. Tonight, he had steel in his hand. The push-up. He slid up on Bear casual, like he was just passing by. No words at first. Then he squared up in Bear's space, eyes hard. "You Georgia boys think y'all running this place," Crazy Kid said, flashing the blade just enough for Bear to see. Bear didn't answer. He just stared, that slow, cold look he had before something bad happened. The first hit. The blade moved fast. Crazy Kid lunged, catching Bear in the back. Metal slid into muscle with a wet sound, and 9's hands gripped the bars tight. But Bear didn't fold. He didn't even go down. The rage. It was like the pain flipped a switch. Bear spun, his big arms snapping around Crazy Kid. Bear lifted him clean off the floor, all 200 pounds, like he was nothing. And then the drop with a roar that echoed off the tier. Bear hurled him over the railing. The body hit the concrete below with a sound that silenced the whole unit. No movement. No sound. Crazy Kid was gone before medical even got there. The lockdown, the sirens screamed a second later, but by then everyone knew. The compound was about to freeze. For the next 90 days, McCreary stayed on ice. No yard, no movement, nothing but steel doors and whispers through the cracks. When the gates finally rolled again, word spread fast. Fish, the DC shot caller, was dead. Nobody saw it happen. Nobody asked. But everyone knew why. In the feds, you didn't start a war you couldn't win. DC had handled their own business. The quiet discomfort. In the feds, you learned quick what you could overlook. 9 had been around long enough to know that sometimes politics required turning a blind eye, even to things that ate at your core. The Muslims were deep in McCreary, not just in numbers, but in discipline. Their structure was tight, their loyalty unquestioned. They prayed together, moved together, fought together. But loyalty wasn't the same as purity. Everyone knew some of their ranks were dirty, paperwork that wouldn't pass the sniff test. Rats, cooperators, men who'd buried their own brothers to save themselves. Still, nobody touched them, not because they believed in them, but because no one wanted the smoke. The Muslims weren't just a gang, they were a faith, and in the feds, men would die for that. The problem 9 and Big O stayed out of it at first. It wasn't their business. But the game changed the day Sadiq stepped into the picture. Siddiq wasn't just any Muslim. He was a gangster disciple before he converted, a Memphis boy with blood in the streets. And he was dirty. Everybody knew it. Years back, Siddiq had snitched on half the GD leadership in Memphis. Knowledge's own brother had caught a life sentence behind his statements. Knowledge, God body, 5%er, Tennessee car shot caller, had swallowed it when Siddiq walked in wearing a kufi and claiming the Shahada. But it was only a matter of time before the past caught up. The clash. It started small, a look across the chow hall, a few words exchanged in the yard. You know what you did, Knowledge told him flat. No threats, just truth. Siddiq smiled. That was before Islam, brother. That life is dead to me. Not to my brother, Knowledge shot back. From there, the air in McCreary got heavy. The dirty South car was watching. The Muslim car was watching. Even the shot callers from other cars were leaning in, waiting to see if it would break into war. The breaking point. It happened in the TV room. Small crowd, everyone pretending to watch a game they didn't care about. Siddiq walked in like he owned the place. Knowledge stood up slow. You gon' give that same energy you gave my brother? The room froze. The Muslims shifted on one side, Dirty South on the other. Nine's dilemma. From the back, Nine felt Big O's eyes on him. This was more than a personal beef. It was politics, and if it went wrong, the whole let it slide God, Big O said under his breath. They too deep. But Nine knew better. In the 5% teachings, letting a known rat breathe was a crack in the foundation. And cracks brought the walls down. The decision Nine stood up, stepping beside Knowledge. If it's about numbers, we got 'em too, Nine said, his voice steady. And if it's about truth, we got more of that than anybody here. The Muslims stiffened. It was no longer between Knowledge and Siddiq. Now it was Dirty South versus the nation. And in that moment, Nine knew there was no walking it back. The first crack Nine knew better than to paint the whole nation with the same brush. Yeah, there were rats in kufis, but there were also real soldiers in Islam who lived by the book. And if you knew the teachings, you knew the Quran didn't leave much room for betrayal. Rollo was one of them. From Georgia, respected everywhere he touched down. His word carried weight, not just with the Muslims, but with half the compound. Men listened when he spoke. Nine didn't come at him sideways. No threats, no names, just an indirect seed. Let me ask you something, Nine said one day in the yard, leaning on the fence like it was just another conversation. What do the teachings really say about a traitor? Rollo's eyes narrowed. What you mean? Somebody who stood next to you, ate with you, prayed with you, then fed you to the wolves. For a moment, Rollo didn't answer. The noise of the yard faded behind the weight of the question. Then he lowered his head, voice calm, but edged with truth. The Quran says that man will not see paradise, he said. Nine nodded slow. No follow-up, no argument. Just let the words hang in the air like smoke. Rollo looked at him, and in that glance, they both knew a crack had just formed in the unity. And cracks only got bigger. The blade in the shadows. The whispers came first, not from the yard, not from the guards, from inside the ranks. Among the Muslims, it was easy to tell who was truly walking the path and who was just wearing the robe. The real brothers prayed on time, kept their discipline, and carried themselves like men on a mission. The fakes? They slipped. You'd catch them sneaking pork in the chow hall, laughing about it like it was nothing. Their kufis were props, not crowns. And the real Muslims, they started to drift away from them, keeping their circle pure. Siddiq didn't care about any of that. His laugh was cold, sharp like the steel he knew other men were afraid to draw on him. He strutted through the yard with the very brothers protecting him, wearing the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. And maybe he was, to everyone else. But not to Nine. Shadiq's arrogance was gasoline, and Nine had been holding a lit match ever since knowledge told him the truth, that this man had his own blood rotting in a cell for life. It happened fast, too fast for anyone to call it out. Nine didn't announce it, didn't posture or warn. He moved like smoke slipping between shadows, sliding up behind Shadiq as if he were just another passerby in the yard. His hand was steady, grip firm, and the blade was already in motion before Shadiq's brain could register the danger. Steel-kissed flesh, a short, deep drive, the kind that didn't need to be repeated. Straight into the kidney. Shadiq stiffened. His laugh died in his throat, replaced with a wet gasp. His eyes went wide, confusion painted all over them, as if they couldn't believe his life was actually spilling out onto the dirt. The yard froze. Every eye watched in a silence heavier than lockdown. Nine stepped back, no rush, letting the blade disappear as easily as it came. Shadiq's knees buckled. He clutched his side, the warmth of his own blood soaking through his fingers. His gaze found Nine, and in that instant, there was no gang, no religion, no politics, just the face of the man who sent him to meet his God. He hit the ground, lifeless before the COs even blew their whistles. And Nine, he didn't blink. Holy war, Shadiq's body wasn't even cold before the war came. It started with shouting, the kind that echoed off steel and concrete. And within seconds, it was fists, steel, and blood. The Muslims moved as one, charging in waves, their chants turning the air electric. To them, this wasn't politics anymore. It was jihad, a holy war. But Georgia stood tall. Tennessee locked arms with them. Florida came in like a rip current, pulling the fight wherever they crashed. The dirty South car wasn't about to fold, not here, not now. The yard was chaos, bodies slamming into each other, blades flashing in quick bursts. You couldn't tell where one fight ended and another began. The COs hung back at first, like they were watching a gladiator show. Even the tower guards didn't fire the rubber rounds right away. This was what they lived for, the spectacle of men willing to die over principle. For hours, it was like the prison itself had turned into one giant war drum. Then, Rollo's voice cut through it all. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The weight in it made the yard go still, like somebody just pressed pause on a riot. He stood in the middle, robes moving in the wind, eyes sweeping the yard. His words rolled out heavy, sharp with the truth. The Quran says a traitor will not see paradise, and any man who defends a traitor stands with him on Judgment Day. The words hit harder than any shank. A crack formed in the Muslim ranks right there. Some brothers stepped back, faces hard with the realization they'd been protecting the wrong one. The rest stood frozen, caught between loyalty and the truth they couldn't deny. That was the moment the war stopped being fists and blades and became something deeper. A war for the soul of the yard. The yard stayed quiet long after Rollo finished speaking. Even the COs, who normally barked orders or threw gas to break things up, didn't move right away. It was like everyone knew something had shifted, not just in the politics, but in the air itself. Nine stood on one side, chest still heaving from the adrenaline, sweat running down his temples. He studied Rollo. The man had a calm about him, the kind you only see in someone who's lived through storms and learned how to walk through them without flinching. When the COs finally moved in, it wasn't with the usual riot control energy. They just ordered everyone to the ground, cuffed up the ones still holding weapons, and pulled Shadiq's body away. No extra beatings, no lockdown order. They wanted this to blow over without more headlines. Later that night, when the block was quiet and the lights were low, 9 was leaning against the bars of his cell when Rollo walked up. No smile, no hand extended, just 2 men looking each other in the eye. "You handled your business," Rollo said. 9 nodded. "You handled yours." They didn't need to speak on it much. Respect wasn't built with 1,000 words. It was built in moments where men showed exactly who they were. From then on, they started moving like they had an unspoken understanding. 9 didn't try to take over the Muslim car, and Rollo didn't interfere in Dirty South business. But every so often, they'd trade information about movements in the yard, which guards were working with who, and which paperwork didn't check out. It wasn't friendship, it was survival. And in the feds, that counted for more than love. The weeks that followed felt almost controlled. The lines between Muslims and the Dirty South weren't erased, but they weren't bleeding like before. Business moved. Parlay tickets ran smooth. Even the COs seemed less eager to stir the pot. But 9 knew better than to get comfortable. Peace in the feds was like a glass window, clear one moment, shattered the next. And somewhere deep in his gut, he could feel it. The next break was coming. Chapter 19, Building Blocks. The first sit-down between Rollo, 9, and Knowledge wasn't planned. It happened in the back corner of the law library, where the hum of the old fluorescent lights drowned out most conversations, and the COs only walked through when they felt like flexing authority. Knowledge was flipping through a thick casebook when 9 dropped into the seat beside him. Rollo followed a moment later, like the move had been coordinated without a single word exchanged. For a minute, they just sat there, flipping pages, pretending to read. That was the dance in the feds. Never look like you're plotting, even when you are. "You ever notice," Knowledge started, not looking up from his book, "how these laws got more tricks than a street hustler?" Rollo smirked. "Law's just another hustle, brother. The only difference is, they wear robes instead of gold chains." 9 didn't smile. He just nodded. "That's why you gotta know both games, the street game and the man's game. If you don't, you end up on the wrong side of the table every time." That cracked the door. From there, conversations flowed in bits and pieces, shared war stories, code talk about past plays, unspoken agreements on how to move in a place where one wrong step could get you buried in the SU or worse. Over the next few weeks, they met in different spots: the weight pile, the laundry, the chow hall when the timing was right. They learned each other's tempers, their tells, the pressure points that would set them off or calm them down. 9 noticed that Rollo was measured, every word chosen, every move calculated. He spoke when needed, and when he did, men listened. Knowledge was sharper than most gave him credit for. His mouth was quicker than his hands, but when the time came, he didn't hesitate. His loyalty was personal, tied to blood and the codes of the 5%. It was in those quiet, coded meetings that the 3 of them began to shape something bigger, a loose network that could cross cars without setting off alarms. Dirty South, Tennessee, and the Muslims all had reasons to stand alone. But together they could shift the balance of power in the unit without ever raising their voices. The guards didn't see it yet. The shot callers from other cars didn't believe it was possible. But 9 could feel it. This was the kind of structure that could either build an empire or be the spark that set the whole compound on fire. Chapter 19 continued, Trial by Yard. It started small, just a mix-up in the chow line. A Florida boy named Rico bumped shoulders with one of the Muslim brothers from Philly. Normally, that's a my bad, and you keep it moving. But the Philly brother had been one of Shadiq's closest allies before his death, and some wounds still hadn't healed. Voices got raised. Tray slaps turned to clenched fists, and before long, you had a half-circle forming by the chow hall door, cars lining up behind their people without even thinking. 9 was sitting on the low wall near the handball courts, watching it play out. Knowledge was already on the scene, trying to keep his Tennessee car from jumping in. Rollo walked slow, deliberate, cutting through the crowd until he was face to face with the Philly brother. "Brother," Rollo said, voice calm but with enough weight to make men stop mid-motion. "Are we really about to spill blood over a bump in the line?" Philly's jaw was tight. "This ain't just a bump. This about respect." 9 stood up. "Respect's earned by how you move, not how quick you swing," he said. "You swing now, you're swinging at all of us." The crowd shifted. It wasn't lost on anybody that 9 just said us like they were already one unit. Dirty South, Tennessee, and the Muslims moving like one. That was new. That was dangerous. Rollo glanced at 9, the barest nod passing between them. Then he put his hand on the Philly brother's shoulder, leaned in close, and said something low that no one else could hear. Whatever it was, it worked. Philly stepped back, tension bleeding out of his stance. Knowledge gave the signal, and the Tennessee boys relaxed their shoulders, the knives they'd been. Palming disappearing back into pockets and waistbands. The Florida car fell back too, eyes still hot, but not stupid. By the time chow resumed, the whole yard had seen it. 3 different cars shutting down a fight before it even sparked. No yelling, no flexing, just control. Later, in the cell, Big O laughed when 9 told him what happened. "Boy, you know what you just did. You just put a target on all y'all backs. Ain't nobody gonna let that much unity breathe too long." 9 didn't argue. He knew Big O was right. But he also knew something else. If they could survive the next test, they could run the whole yard without firing a single shot. Chapter 19. The bond. In prison, alliances are usually about convenience. Today's friend is tomorrow's target if the wind changes. But for 9, Rollo, and Knowledge, the bond was different. It wasn't just who had the most soldiers or who ran the biggest hustle. It was about principle. Every night after the yard cleared and the noise of the day settled, the 3 of them would meet in the corner of the law library. 9 would be buried in his legal work, Rollo with a worn copy of the Quran, Knowledge sketching chess plays in a small notebook. They traded game like currency. Rollo broke down how to read people by what they didn't say. Knowledge taught how Tennessee's prison politics worked, the quiet way you could make a man move without ever raising your voice. 9 shared the 5% teachings that kept him sharp, using supreme mathematics to frame every move like it was war strategy. By week 3, their conversations were moving from prison politics to life after prison. Knowledge talked about how he would love to have kids, Rollo about building a Muslim community in his neighborhood, 9 about building something legit, trucking, music, real estate, anything that didn't involve a 5K or a coffin. They didn't always agree, but they respected each other's code. In a place where respect was worth more than commissary, that was everything. Chapter 20. The Break 9 had been working his own case since day 1, not just scratching at it, studying it, picking apart every detail. He knew the law better than most attorneys now, and one thing had always bothered him. His state and federal sentences were supposed to run concurrent. By law, the state could run with the feds, but the feds couldn't run with the state. Yet somehow, they had hit him with both sentences, like they were 2 different crimes, when they were the same offense. It wasn't like he'd been released and caught a new charge. He'd gone to trial in the state first, lost, then the feds had tried to flip him. When he refused, they indicted him federally for the same drugs, the same case. They'd even sentenced him in the feds as if it was a second offense. 9 knew that was double jeopardy in disguise. And now the appeals court saw it too. The order came down quiet, just a piece of paper slid under his cell door. Conviction overturned, federal sentence vacated. Release immediate, Chapter 21. The gate. The COs came for him before sunrise. No fanfare, no warning, just, "Jones, pack it up." Big O shook his hand at the door. "Stay solid out there," he said, eyes hard. Rollo and Knowledge nodded once, the kind of nod men give when they know they might never see you again, but the bond won't break. On the ride out, Nine didn't say a word. He didn't trust freedom until the air hit his face. At the gate, she was waiting. Nikki. She'd been laying low the whole bid, keeping her distance from the noise, but always in his corner. She stepped out of a black Charger, hair laid, eyes wet, the kind of fine that makes you forget the years in an instant. They didn't hug right away. They just stared at each other for a second, both calculating everything that had changed and everything that hadn't. The drive was quiet at first, but Nikki broke it. "There's something you need to know," she said. Chapter 22, The Betrayal. Nine's hands tightened on his knees. "Who?" "Your man from Miami," she said. "Lil D." The name was enough. The man who'd once been his plug, who'd set the rules about mothers and meeting in living rooms, had turned rat. And not just rat, he was actively working with the feds to set Nine up again. It made sense. Lil D knew betrayal was a death sentence in Nine's world. The only way to avoid it was to put Nine back behind bars. Or in the ground. Nikki pulled to the side of the road and looked him dead in the eye. "They're watching you," she said. "They want you to make a move so they can snatch you again." Nine leaned back in his seat, eyes cold behind his Cartier glasses. "They think I'm gonna come at him reckless," he said. "But we gonna do it different. I ain't never lost a war by playing the other man's game." Nine didn't answer Nikki right away. He just stared at the road, watching the gray stretch of Kentucky mountains roll past. "Don't stop driving," he finally said. His voice was calm, but it had weight. "Not till we out these mountains." Nikki nodded, pressed the gas. She knew better than to ask questions when his mind was working like that. Hours later, when the last of the mountain curves gave way to Tennessee flatland, Nine told her to pull into a roadside motel. It wasn't the kind of place he'd normally stay, but right now, it was perfect. Anonymous, low, quiet. The neon vacancy sign flickered like it had been burning since the 70s. Nikki parked the car, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a second looking at him. "You sure we good here?" she asked. Nine gave a short nod. "We ain't here for good. We here for quiet." Inside, the room smelled faintly of wood polish and old curtains. The bedspread was ugly, patterned with some faded green flowers. But to Nine, it was freedom. It wasn't a prison bunk, and that was enough. The moment the door clicked shut behind them, Nikki turned and wrapped her arms around his neck. It was urgent, the kind of embrace from a woman who had waited too long. He kissed her back, slow at first, but it didn't stay slow. Clothes came off in a trail to the bed. Her skin was warm, soft, and familiar, but it felt brand new after all those years. Nine's hands traced the curve of her hips like he was relearning her shape from memory. She held his face in her hands, looking him dead in the eyes before their mouths met again, deeper this time. The first time was all heat. Years of frustration and longing spilling out in movements neither of them tried to control. The second time, slower, was different, like they were reminding each other of what they had, what had kept them both alive through everything. The room filled with the sound of their breathing, the quiet creak of the bed, the occasional gasp that broke. Through the silence like lightning. His hand slid through her hair, pulling her closer, while hers gripped his back like she never wanted to let go. By the time it was over, they lay tangled together in the dim light, the cheap lamp casting shadows across the wall. Nikki's head rested on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. He stroked her arm without thinking. For 2 days, they barely left the room. They ordered food only once, slept when they wanted, and woke when the urge to touch each other came back. Outside, the world kept moving, but in that motel, time had stopped. It was the only peace they'd have before Georgia came calling. Chapter 24. The Gift and the Snake. 9 pulled into Columbus, Georgia like a man sliding back into his own throne. The streets looked the same, liquor stores still leaning on every corner, same cracked sidewalks, same whispers waiting to see if he'd really made it home. But he wasn't moving back into that world directly. Nikki had already set them up in something different, a 2-story house sitting on a quiet lake, tucked deep in a gated community where folks jogged at sunrise and waved to strangers like it was Mayberry. It wasn't his style, but it was safe. For now, the rule was simple. Family only. No crew, no street soldiers, no hang-ons. The less movement, the better. 9 was sipping coffee in his upstairs office when the alert from the gate camera pinged his phone. One glance at the screen, and the coffee didn't taste the same. Lil D. He stood there a moment, studying the image. That same Miami swagger, the gold chain swinging like a pendulum, the smile that could have sold lies wholesale. From the bed, Nikki stirred, rolling over naked and squinting at the light. What's wrong? 9 kept his eyes on the phone. Lil D at the gate. Her face tightened. You want me to? Let him in, 9 said, already pulling on jeans. By the time D stepped through the door, he was all charm, moving like nothing had ever been sour between them. In his hand was a brown Louis Vuitton duffel, fat with cash. Welcome home, boss man, D grinned, setting the bag on the counter. Time to really get to the money. I already told the crew, Georgia and Alabama, all you. Street's been waiting. 9 unzipped the bag just enough to see the stacks, neat and tight. A man could drown in that kind of green. But money was never the measure, trust was. He zipped it back up slow, looking D right in the eye. How's your mom? The smile flickered, just for half a breath. She good. Tell her I'll be down there to see her, 9 said, letting the words hang in the air. D shifted his weight. Yeah, she'd like that. 9 didn't blink. He already knew D didn't want that visit, because no matter what poison ran in his veins, his mom and sister still loved 9 like family. He'd saved their lives once. That kind of thing couldn't be erased, and D knew it. But 9 also knew a gift that fat came with strings, and every string led back to a noose. Chapter 25. The Challenger. The black Suburban purred as 9 eased it down the long driveway. Nikki had it sitting in the 3-car garage like a sleeping panther. Matte paint, presidential tint, and most importantly, bulletproof from grill to tail lights. He slid behind the wheel with that old muscle memory of moving through a city where every corner could mean trouble. Destination: Big Willie's spot. Big Willie was one of the few old heads 9 still respected without question. A turtle in nothing that made the feds raise an eyebrow. This shit don't even register on their radar, Willie used to say. And all the local cops smoke. When 9 stepped into Willie's shop, it was all laughs and dap. Stories from back in the day. Cigars, coffee, the kind of conversations that made him almost forget the razor's edge he'd been walking since touching down. Almost. On the way out, the air felt different. Heavy. He slid into the Suburban, closed the door, and was just checking his mirrors when the growl of a Dodge Challenger rolled up beside him. Bright paint, loud pipes. 2 young cats in hoodies leaning halfway out the windows, eyes locked on him like it was feeding time. 9's instincts clicked before his brain could. He hunched low and twisted the wheel just as the first spray of semi-auto fire lit up the street. The sound was thunder in a tunnel, rounds bouncing off the Suburban's armor like hail on steel. Glass spider-webbed but didn't shatter. The doors thudded with each impact, the whole truck rocking under the assault. They were counting on that bulletproof to trap him, to make him think he was untouchable, keep him boxed in. But armor only works if they aim for the body. A head shot through the gap in the window glass. That still ended King's. 9 punched the gas, the Suburban roaring forward, clipping the Challenger's bumper as he slid around a corner and disappeared down a side street. Heart still calm, but mind running. Lil D? Could be. D played dirty and had a short memory for loyalty. But there was something off about this. Those kids moved like soldiers, not neighborhood hitters. His suspicion sharpened when the flashing lights arrived, not Columbus PD. Blacked-out Tahoes, tactical gear, earpieces. Federal. They were on scene before the locals even hit the radio. That wasn't luck. That was coordination. And that meant whatever this was, it was bigger than a street beef. Chapter 26. Hunter and hunted 9 didn't go straight back to the lake house. That would have been suicide. Instead, he cut through the city's back veins, alleys behind strip malls, industrial roads near the river, while the Suburban's armor soaked up the smell of hot lead. He parked in a mechanic's bay he knew off Old Casetta Road, a shop that didn't ask, "Need you to pull this camera footage," 9 told the owner, sliding 2 stacks onto the counter. "This is for you, not the register." Within minutes, they had the shop's rooftop cameras pulled up. The Challenger was there, clear as day, trailing him for at least 8 blocks before they struck. No tags, just tinted-out glass, low stance, and fat rear tires. Professional. 9 leaned in closer. The driver had a bandana over his face, but the passenger... He was too hyped, rocking in his seat before the shots even rang out. The way he moved, the tattoos on his hands, not from Columbus. The style screamed Miami. 9's chest got tight. That lined up with what Nicky had hinted at, that his old Miami connect, the same one now wearing a snitch jacket, might be moving pieces to get him erased. He left the shop, phone in hand. First call, Big Willie. "You got any word on a bright Challenger in the city?" 9 asked. Silence. Then a low whistle. "Yeah, but it's ghost. Ain't nobody claiming it. Word is it's been parked in different spots every night. Sometimes the driver's white, sometimes black. Could be the same car, could be 3 of them." That was worse than confirmation. That meant it was either a crew with real resources or feds using street camouflage. 9 decided to treat it like both. By nightfall, he was in the Suburban again, this time without Nicky. No music, no distractions. He circled the city like a shark, doubling back on routes, watching mirrors. Then he saw it. Same stance, same rumble, 3 cars back in traffic. The Challenger slid in and out of lanes like it was in no rush, like it was just another driver. But every time 9 turned, it turned. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He let it ring twice, then picked up. A voice, flat and cold. "That car behind you ain't us. But we ain't stopping them if they finish the job." Click. The Challenger closed distance, weaving toward his lane. 9's mind sharpened. The hunter in him was awake. If they wanted him boxed in, they were about to find out the box had teeth. Chapter 27. Turning the hunt. 9 didn't panic. Panic got you dead. He kept the Suburban steady, letting the Challenger believe it was closing in. He knew the city like the veins in his own hand, every blind alley, every dead end that looked like a dead end. He passed the Phoenix City Bridge, doubled back through Uptown, then cut down a service road behind an abandoned mill. The Challenger followed, still thinking it was running the hunt. 9 slid a switch on the dash. The Suburban's rear bulletproof window dropped halfway, and he pulled a short-barrel AR from under the seat. His breathing slowed, eyes scanning mirrors. The road ended in a T. To the left, a freight yard. To the right, an underpass with just enough clearance for the Suburban, but not for a car coming in hot behind it without slamming brakes. 9 took the right. The Challenger followed, too close. 9 stomped the brake. The Suburban's weight dipped hard. The Challenger's front bumper kissed the back of his armor-plated ride with a thunk. Before the driver could even curse, 9 was out the door, AR aimed dead center. "Out the car!" 9 barked. The passenger's hands shot up. Tattoos on his knuckles, same ones from the shop footage. The driver hesitated, so 9 yanked the door, dragged him out, and shoved him against the Challenger's hood. "What crew sent you?" 9 asked. The driver kept his mouth shut, eyes flat. But the passenger's voice cracked, young and shaky. "Ain't no crew, man. We just deliverin'." 9's eyes narrowed. "Delivering what?" "In the trunk," the passenger said. 9 popped it and froze. Inside, under a black tarp, was a small duffel. Not money, not drugs, not guns. Paper, stacks of it. Court documents, surveillance photos, transcripts, his name, his case, Nikki's face, Rollo's name, Knowledge's name. Everything from the state and federal files. But some of it was new, like it hadn't even gone through the courts yet. 9 pulled one page from the pile. Confidential witness statement, Derek Gleason. And under that, a signature. 9's stomach turned to steel. The driver smirked. "Guess you know now." 9 didn't blink. "Yeah, I know everything I need to know." Chapter 28, The Ghost Army. The driver and passenger barely had time to process 9's expression before the street lit up with thunder. The first volley wasn't warning shots, it was execution. Rounds punched through the Challenger's side doors, glass shattered, and the force of the hits jerked their bodies up before gravity dropped them back, lifeless. The silence after was sharp, almost unnatural. 9 didn't flinch. Yeah, the feds would know he did it. But this wasn't about hiding. This was about message. If they were playing for keeps, it stayed in the streets. 9 wiped his hands on his jeans, pulled his phone, and made the call he hadn't made in years. The line clicked. No hello, no small talk. "You ready?" 9 asked. A voice like cold steel came back, already in motion. Eskimo Sixlack, the Ghost King. Nobody outside a chosen few had ever seen his face, not in prison, not on the street, not on a single camera. His legend was that if he got your name, your days were numbered. He didn't run a crew you could see, didn't move like a normal hitter. His people slid through shadows, always 2 steps ahead, leaving nothing but empty shells and rumors. Behind him came Certified, a name whispered like a curse in cities from Philly to Houston. Certified wasn't a gunman, he was the gunman, a ghost sniper who didn't miss. Distance didn't matter. Wind didn't matter. If Certified said you were gone, you were gone. You wanted quiet. Certified's voice was almost bored. "Quiet enough they don't see you coming," 9 said, "but loud enough everybody knows it was me who sent it." There was a pause, then Sixlack chuckled low. "We'll paint the town without leaving a drop." 9 hung up, looked down at the duffel bag of federal files, and felt the old fire in his chest. Lil D thought the badge made him untouchable. The feds thought they could play chess with him. 9 was about to flip the board. Chapter 29, Shadows Move. First, Lil D didn't know it yet, but the countdown had started. Eskimo Sixlack was already in the city before sunset. He never rolled deep, just one silent driver and a bag full of tools that didn't come from any store. He didn't make noise. He made absence. Step 1. Cut Lil D's eyes and ears. By 2 a.m., every camera covering Lil D's main stash house had been fried. Not stolen, not smashed, just dead, their wiring surgically severed so the power still ran, but nothing recorded. Dee's lookout on the south side, a young dude named Spud, got pulled into a corner by a man he swore wasn't there a second ago. The man whispered one thing in his ear, something about Spud's mother's address, and then vanished. Spud packed a bag and was on a Greyhound before morning. While 6 lakh erased Dee's sight, Certified lined up on his hearing. Certified didn't just take lives, he took confidence. His rifle was already mounted 3 blocks away from a nightclub Dee's people frequented. At 11:47 p.m., just as Dee's number 2, Rico, stepped out for a smoke, Certified's round kissed the concrete right between Rico's legs, close enough to burn. Rico dropped his cigarette and damn near broke his neck running back inside. No one saw the shooter. The street was empty, but that bullet had a return address written in 9's tone. Step 2, cut the money. By the next day, 2 of Dee's out-of-town runners were missing, their rental cars found parked neat in a Walmart lot with the keys still inside. No damage, no struggle, just gone. The product and the cash with them. The streets whispered that it was the feds, but Dee knew the feds didn't move like that. He started switching phones, moving more paranoid than usual, but paranoia eats sleep. By the 3rd night, Eskimo Sixlack was in his kitchen, no doors broken, no windows cracked, just there, sitting at the table like he'd been invited. Dee walked in and froze. "You don't know me," Sixlack said calmly, "but your ghost does." Dee blinked, confused. Sixlack slid a folded piece of paper across the table. On it was a list of names, not enemies but loved ones, family, kids, people Dee would die for. "You've been working for the badge," Sixlack said. "That means your time is short. The only question is, do you want it to hurt?" Dee reached for the paper, but when he looked up, Sixlack was gone. The kitchen was empty. From that moment, Lil Dee wasn't a boss anymore. He was prey. Chapter 30, One Choice. Left Lil Dee's phone buzzed nonstop all morning, the feds on one line, street calls on the other. But the one that hit different was his mama. "Baby," she said, voice warm and teasing, "guess who in my kitchen right now?" Before Dee could answer, he heard her laughing in the background. "It's 9. Lord, I'm so happy to see this man. Been too long." Dee froze. His chest tightened. The feds had just told him to stay clear of 9, and here his own mama was, talking like it was a family reunion. Then another voice came on the line, softer, playful. It was Pretty, Dee's younger sister. "Dee, you know it always should have been me and 9, she said with a smile in her tone. "He look even better now, and he still remember how I like my coffee." Dee's throat was dry. He could picture 9 in that kitchen, calm, smiling, shaking his head at Pretty's flirting, his mama serving him breakfast like he was blood. Dee pulled his Challenger to the curb in front of his mother's small brick house. The blinds were open, and he could see 9 standing at the counter, pouring coffee, wearing that unreadable look that made men think twice. Every step Dee took toward that door, he felt the weight of his decision. Lose his family, or cross the feds. When he stepped inside, the smell of eggs and toast wrapped around him. 9 didn't move, didn't even blink. He just said, "Morning, Dee," like they'd been boys yesterday. Dee nodded back, but inside he knew there was no middle ground. One side of that line was blood, the other side was death. Lil Dee sat forward in his mother's living room, elbows digging into his knees, eyes locked on 9 like he was making a last confession. The smell of fried chicken and collard greens from earlier still hung in the air, but the mood was heavy enough to crush it. Dee's mother was in the kitchen humming, washing dishes, happy just knowing 9 was in the house. His sister Pretty had been all smiles earlier, too, throwing playful shots about how it should have been her and 9 years ago. But now, it was just him and Dee, and the truth. "I know the feds better than they think," Dee said finally, leaning back with a bitter smirk. "Everybody talks about how they're untouchable, but I've seen their weakness up close. They scared 9, scared of 2 things they can't control, the rappers and Trump." 9 raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. "They scared of the rappers, 'cause the money and the influence go hand in hand. One hit song can move 1,000,000 people's minds faster than a politician's speech. They scared of Trump, 'cause for all the chaos, he's not really one of them, and he's too friendly with the same people they're trying to kill off or lock up. You think it's a coincidence he just pardoned Larry Hoover?" 9's eyes narrowed. "Hoover?" "Yeah," Dee said, nodding. "That pardon shook the whole structure, sent a signal. The street's got a direct line to the Oval Office if they play it right. And the feds, they've been losing control ever since. They've been trying to shut that door before it opens all the way." Dee sat back, shaking his head slowly. "They can't have rappers and Trump moving in the same lane. That's why they're targeting every high-profile artist they can. Young Thug, Diddy, anybody with real pull in the streets. They can't let the music money turn into political power." 9 leaned back, still watching him. "So where do you fit into this, Dee?" "I fit in 'cause I've been on the inside. I've been their middleman. I know who's moving weight for 'em, who's snitching, and who's next on their list. And right now, you," Dee pointed at 9, "are high up on that list. Not 'cause of what you moving, but because of who you could connect with if you wanted." 9 stayed quiet, but his mind was moving fast. Dee wasn't talking street beef anymore. This was bigger. This was politics mixed with street power, and both sides were willing to kill for it. 9 stared at Dee for a long time. The man sitting across from him had betrayed him once, worked with the same people who caged him. But now his eyes weren't the same as before. There was something in them. Maybe shame, maybe a spark of hope. 9 finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "If you wanted me dead, Dee, you'd have let them finish it. So I'ma let you live. But from here on out, you better use whatever you got left to help slay the giant." Dee exhaled, almost like a weight fell off him. "I can't erase what I did, 9, but I can help end him. I got money. I got access. Hell, I got their money. Years of feeding them info and playing middleman made me rich. Now I'm gonna turn their own power against them." 9 leaned forward, eyes locked on him. "Then we do it right. I still got Big O on the inside, and Rollo." 9 paused, remembering the betrayal. "He runs parts of the feds whether they admit it or not." Dee's head nodded slow. "Then we got the perfect leverage. Big O and Rollo get out, and they owe us heavy. Dee already knew the tool to make it happen, an old contact buried in the system who could move messages where nobody was supposed to see them. He made one call, slid a coded letter, and the message reached Big O inside. "We're moving pieces on the board. Stay ready." Big O moved the next piece. He reached out to Mike Tyson, not through public channels, but through a quiet, personal line they'd kept for years. Tyson was an old friend of Donald Trump, not business associate old, real old, from the days before politics got ugly. One quiet dinner, one serious conversation, and $4 million of the Fed's own money, money Dee had pulled from their pipeline without them noticing, got pushed through the right hands. The deal was done. Big O walked free. Rollo walked free. The streets called it a miracle. The feds called it an internal procedural release. 9 called it the beginning of their war. Chapter 32. The first night out. The black Escalade rolled slow through the gates, tinted so dark it swallowed the night. 9 stood by the lake in the shadow of the trees, watching the headlights snake down the private road. When the door opened, Big O stepped out like he never spent a day behind the wall. Chin high, eyes cold, the same presence that made entire yards go silent. They didn't hug. Men like them didn't need to. They locked eyes and nodded, a silent exchange that said, "We survived. Now let's move." "Fresh air feel different when you ain't breathing it through razor wire," Big O said, looking out over the water. "But don't let the breeze fool you, Nine. The game's uglier now than it's ever been." Nine smirked. "You saying that like I don't know." Big O shook his head. "Nah, you know dirt. I'm talking rot. The Fed's got a network that don't sleep. Politicians, judges, rappers, managers, lawyers. They're all playing pieces for the same side. They let me out 'cause you moved right, but it ain't they don't know I'm already playing 'em." Nine lit a cigarette, the glow flashing in his eyes. "That's why I pulled you. I don't need soldiers who follow orders. I need generals who write 'em." Big O looked back toward the Escalade. Inside, a tall shadow shifted. Rollo. He stepped out, smiling like the devil just got a promotion. "Damn, Nine," Rollo said. "You really went and used their own money to free us. You know that's a declaration of war, right?" Nine didn't blink. "Good. I was tired of fighting skirmishes." The three men stood there, the air thick with unspoken plans. Big O broke the silence. "If we're doing this, we move fast. The same suits that let us walk are gonna come harder now. We can't just win. We gotta make 'em bleed in places they can't stitch up." Nine nodded. "Then we start tomorrow." But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about burning down the system that built cages for men like them. The air inside the lake house was heavy, not from smoke or liquor, but from the weight of what was about to happen. Big O sat across from Nine at the kitchen table, a fresh bottle of White Lightning between them. He wasn't smiling this time. "You know you owe me your life, right?" Big O said, his voice steady but sharp. "Ain't too many men I'd pull out the fire for." Nine leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on him. "And I'm paying you back the only way that matters, bringing the codes and principles back. All that old school shit we grew up on, that's the only thing that kept us alive back then. It's the only thing that's gonna keep us alive now." Big O grunted, nodding slowly. "No more straddling the fence." Nine's voice hardened. "No more playing both sides. You a rat now? That's a dead wish. Period." The thick manila folder sat on the table between them, the files, names, dates, case numbers, every informant who'd ever whispered to the feds, every snake that had eaten at their own table and sold them out. The list was long, and the paper smelled like blood before it was even spilled. Big O flipped it open, running a finger down the first few names. "We going in order?" Nine shook his head. "We go strategic, but there's one rule and no hesitation. We go down this list till it's clean." O's eyes narrowed when he saw a name highlighted in red. "Big Miki." "That one. We spare," Nine said, his tone flat. "History's complicated. I ain't saying he's innocent, but that's a war for another time." Big O frowned. "And the girl?" Nine slid a photo across the table. A smiling woman in a business suit, her eyes hiding a lifetime of betrayal. "Tammy Collins. Confidential Agent 1. The world already knows who she is," Nine said. "She's the kind that keeps getting passes 'cause she got a skirt on. That ends now. She goes first." Big O picked up the photo, studying it like a man memorizing a target. Cold business. Nine lit a cigarette, the flame flickering against his eyes. "This ain't business, O. This is principle." Rain tapped against the black Suburban as Nine and Big O sat outside a diner off a back road in Alabama. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting red and blue shadows across the wet pavement. Tammy Collins was inside, laughing with two other women, her phone face down next to a half-empty glass of wine. To anyone else, she looked harmless, a polished woman in her late 30s, blending in with the after-work crowd. But Nine knew the truth. He had her case files. He had her wire transcripts. He knew every man she'd helped bury for the feds, including two of Big O's closest soldiers. "You ready to make history?" Nine asked, his voice low, eyes never leaving the diner window. Big O cracked his knuckles, glancing at the silenced .45 in his lap. "Ain't nothing to it. You sure we ain't gonna wait? Get her alone somewhere cleaner?" Nine shook his head. "Nah, first one's gotta send a message. Public, loud in the streets, silent in the courtrooms. They gotta know the list is real." Across the lot, Certified sat in a black Charger, rifle resting on the passenger seat, eyes locked on Tammy through the scope. His breathing was calm, heart rate steady like a man clocking in for work. Eskimo Sixlack was already inside, blending in at the counter, sipping black coffee. He'd been there 20 minutes before Tammy even walked in. His job wasn't to kill, it was to make sure no one saw who did. Ghost work. "Timing's everything," Nine said into the comm in his ear. Inside, Eskimo Sixlack casually stood, dropping a 5 on the counter. As he walked past Tammy's booth, he flicked his lighter twice, the signal. The next moment played out like a whisper. Certified's first shot shattered the diner window. The second entered Tammy's temple before her glass even hit the table. No one screamed right away. Shock froze the room. Then the chaos erupted. Eskimo Sixlack was already out the side exit, blending into the shadows. Certified drove off without burning rubber, smooth and surgical. Big O started the Suburban. "First name down," he muttered. Nine exhaled slow, watching the flashing lights in the distance grow closer. Now the streets know the list is real. That night, social media lit up, blurry cell phone footage, whispers about a confidential informant being executed in cold blood. By morning, every rat on the list had read the headlines, and every one of them felt their time ticking down. Tammy Collins was gone. Quiet at first, then loud once the word hit the wire. No trial, no defense, just gone. The streets didn't mourn her, and the game didn't either. But in the glass towers of the federal building, her death was a thunderclap. Agents were running in circles, pulling late-night meetings, tearing through their own ranks. Who knew what? How much had slipped? And most dangerous of all, how did Nine get the files? Inside the bureau, whispers spread. Some said a mole had been feeding him from the inside. Others swore Nine had his own digital ghost army tearing through their servers. Whatever it was, one thing was clear. Nine wasn't supposed to be alive, and he damn sure wasn't supposed to be holding the government's secrets in his hands. For Nine, that was the point. Sitting across from Big O, he laid it bare. They scared O. Not 'cause Tammy gone, she was just a pawn. They scared 'cause the paperwork made it to me. That folder ain't just names, it's proof. They can't hide behind rumors no more. Every move they made, every snitch they bred, every rapper they tried to choke out, it's all written down. They thought the files was theirs. But now, it's mine. Big O nodded, but his eyes cut sharper. You know what that mean, right? They're coming harder now. They can't let the streets believe you bigger than them. Nine smirked. They late. The streets already believe. What the feds didn't know was that Nine's reach wasn't just paperwork. It was bloodline deep. Old alliances, prison connections, rappers who owed him favors, and ghosts that moved with no trace. The deeper truth? The leak wasn't just from one folder. The leak was systemic. The house of cards had been rotting for years, and Nine had just pulled the bottom piece. In their war rooms, the feds still thought they were playing chess. But in reality, they were already checkmated. Chapter 33. Lil Pakistan 9 thought he had the map laid out, every move calculated. But no plan survives without a crack, and Rollo was that crack. Fresh out with the feds off his back and the Muslims standing behind him, Rollo should have been focused on the bigger picture. But the streets, they don't let go easy. The itch to hustle was still in him, stronger than any teaching, stronger than any brotherhood. Quietly, without Nine's blessing, Rollo reached back out to an old plug. Not cartel, not feds, someone who had been around since his early days. Together they started moving weight, brick by brick, funneling it straight back into the one place Rollo swore he'd never touch again. The bluff. But this wasn't the bluff of old. Rollo's return flipped it. The cash poured in like a flood, and with his Muslim brothers running the blocks, the whole neighborhood transformed into a fortress. Guns, money, loyalty, it all revolved around him. They called it Lil Pakistan now, a place where the laws of America didn't matter, where the code of the streets and the Quran mixed into something untouchable. The people worshipped him. The kids saw him as a savior. But to Nine, it was a red flag. He knew power like that came with consequences. Too much attention, too much shine, too much greed. And worse, the feds never let their tools build kingdoms. Rollo thought he was free, but in reality, he was just building the next battlefield. Nine told Big O, "We might have beat the feds on one front, but Rollo, he just opened another. Lil Pakistan ain't paradise, it's a powder keg, and when it blows, it's gonna blow on us all." When Rollo put the first bricks back on the block, nobody could have predicted how fast the transformation would come. Within months, the bluff went from a broken, hollowed-out neighborhood to something that looked like a small nation inside Atlanta. Layout and environment. The heart of Lil Pakistan was the masjid, a converted warehouse painted green and white, where Rollo's Muslims prayed 5 times a day. But outside those doors, it was all business. Streets were lined with trap houses disguised as halal shops, where bricks moved in duffel bags under the cover of prayer rugs and Quran studies. Armed soldiers stood on every corner, some in kufis, some in ski masks, but all loyal. They weren't just guarding dope, they were guarding an empire, the money system. Rollo had introduced zakat traps. Every dealer was required to donate a cut of their profit back to the community. Streets got paved, abandoned houses got flipped, kids had food, and funerals were paid for. Cash moved through legit fronts, hookah lounges, car washes, even a school. From the outside, it looked like uplift. On the inside, it was a fortress of laundering. The people's view. To the residents, Lil Pakistan was safety. Gunshots went down, rent got paid. Kids had backpacks for school. Rollo was the sheikh of the streets. To the hustlers, it was paradise. You got protection, you got purpose, and as long as you followed Rollo's word, you got money. But to Nine, it was dangerous. He saw the same story written 100 times. Kingdoms built too fast get destroyed even faster. The feds' nightmare. Lil Pakistan wasn't just about dope. It was about power. Rollo was creating a self-sustained ecosystem, one not tied to Washington, not tied to the state, and worst of all, not tied to the feds. The intelligence files labeled it domestic narco-terrorism, and the whispers inside the bureau said, if Lil Pakistan spreads, Atlanta ain't America no more. Nine's reflection. Standing on the edge of the bluff, Nine watched the call to prayer echo through the streets. He saw young boys kneeling with Qurans in their laps, while their older brothers stood watch with AKs. It was order, it was discipline, it was family. But Nine knew the truth. Discipline without restraint becomes tyranny. And the feds, they were already circling, waiting for the first crack in Rollo's dream. Power built on bricks and bullets don't last. Nine whispered to Big O. "This ain't no lil Pakistan. This a graveyard being dug in advance." The call to prayer had just ended when Nine walked through the bluff. The streets of Lil Pakistan were alive, kids darting between hookah lounges and halal shops, men in kufis posted on corners with rifles slung across their shoulders. It wasn't the same neighborhood Nine remembered. It was a stronghold. Inside the masjid warehouse, incense burned thick. Rollo sat on a low chair, draped in white, his beard fuller now, his eyes sharper. Around him, a circle of Muslims stood like statues, silent but deadly. Nine stepped forward, his voice calm but heavy. "Rollo, you know why I'm here. Ain't no future in building an empire on poison. You preaching discipline and order, but you pumping death into the same streets you claim to save." For a second, silence hung. Then Rollo's smile crept across his face. "Brother Nine," he said, his tone smooth, almost mocking, "you don't understand. This ain't poison, this is survival. My people eat, my people live. While you talk about codes, I built a nation. Look around you, Lil Pakistan is order." Nine shook his head. "It's order built on sand. The feds coming, the snakes in your circle plotting, and the streets don't forgive." That's when it happened. 3 of Rollo's men stepped forward, their AKs rising, barrels pointed straight at Nine. The metal clicked, the tension snapped. Rollo leaned back in his chair, voice low but cold. "You got no power here, Nine. Not in my house, not in my nation. I let you walk in return. If you do—" He paused, raising a finger. "It will be your death." Nine stood there, eyes sweeping the room. Every soldier's hand was steady, every gaze locked on him. He felt the weight of the moment, the old bond with Rollo on one side and the inevitable war brewing on the other. Finally, Nine nodded slowly. "I hear you, but remember this. Nations built on betrayal always crumble, and when yours falls, it won't be the feds that bury you. It'll be your own." He turned, the barrels still tracking him, and walked out. The heavy doors slammed behind him. Lil Pakistan stayed humming with prayer and commerce, but a storm was already moving in its direction. Sizzle had watched Nine from the first moment he stepped foot in Lil Pakistan. Rollo was her king for now, but she wasn't the type to serve one man forever. She wanted an empire, her empire. And when she saw the way Nine carried himself, calm, dangerous, moving like a man who'd seen every trap before it was set, she knew he was another king. A king she needed to conquer if she wanted to rule them all. One night she slipped away from Rollo's fortress, dressed in silk with the scent of temptation wrapped around her, and found her way to Nine. "Why keep fighting Rollo?" she whispered, her hand tracing the table between them. "He's blinded by prayer and greed. But you could be more. I can help you overthrow him." Nine leaned back, his eyes cold. He didn't move, didn't bite. He had seen women like her before, fire dressed in perfume, ambition hiding behind beauty. But he didn't dismiss her either. Because if Sizzle was making moves, it meant Rollo's kingdom wasn't as solid as it looked. Meanwhile, the streets were changing faster than anyone expected. Eskimo, Sixlack, and Certified were running through the paperwork, dropping snitches one by one. The feds couldn't keep up. Each time they tried to regroup, another name went cold, another informant ended up in the dirt. Panic had them moving sloppy, leaking fear in every direction. And then there was Trump. The president had unleashed something nobody saw coming. A black army, disciplined, armed, and loyal. They weren't just marching through cities, they were patrolling the borders. No drugs moved, no weapons crossed, no illegals slipped through without their eyes on it. But the move that shook the world. They froze child sex trafficking dead in its tracks. For the first time in decades, the pipeline was sealed. The feds were bleeding power, rappers were growing influence, and Trump had turned the tables in ways that made the old guard nervous. In the middle of it all, Sizzle leaned closer to Nine, her voice smooth as venom. "You could be the one to rule this new world. All you have to do is let me in." Nine didn't answer right away. He just watched her with eyes that never blinked, a silent king weighing the cost of letting fire too close to the throne. Nine had sworn to himself he would never bow, not to the feds, not to Rollo, not even to temptation. But temptation didn't care about oaths. Sizzle was unlike any woman he had ever seen, dark-skinned, flawless, with eyes that burned blue like ice set in fire. The first time she looked at him, it was like she peeled through his armor, straight to the man beneath. Nine told himself he would play her, keep her close, never cross that line. Victory required discipline, and he had more of it than any man alive. But Sizzle was patient. She never pressed, never begged. She just appeared, sliding through shadows, finding him when he least expected it, whispering words that clawed at his mind. Each time she left, he told himself he'd stood strong. Each time, he realized she'd left a piece of herself behind. And then one night, she didn't leave. She found her way into his bed, and the moment their bodies touched, Nine knew he was no longer in control. The sex was violent and tender at the same time, a storm that dragged him to the edge of madness. She took him places he'd never been, dragged his soul down to the depths of hell, and when it was over, he wasn't sure if he'd survived or been reborn in her fire. From that night on, Nine's war shifted. The rats and snitches still mattered, but the fire in his chest no longer burned for them. His only wish was that Rollo was dead. He wanted Lil Pakistan in flames, wanted Rollo stripped of everything he built, wanted Sizzle free of the chains she claimed held her. For the first time since he touched the paperwork, Neen wasn't thinking about names on a list. He was thinking about territory, armies, and blood. The war wasn't against the feds anymore. It was against Pakistan. Rollo wasn't slow. He could command a block, read a man's fear in a blink, and smell betrayal before it ever reached his door. For weeks, something in Lil Pakistan felt off. His soldiers were loyal. His money was multiplying. The drugs flowed steady. But there was a hollowness in his chest he couldn't name. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the power. It was Sizzle. Her eyes didn't linger on him anymore. Her smile no longer curved when his name was spoken. She was present in body, absent in spirit, and Rollo knew exactly who had stolen the piece of her she no longer offered. 9. The thought alone made his blood boil. Not just that she had laid with another man, but betrayal so deep it split him in half, a knife pressed against his pride. But he wasn't about to dirty his own hands. Rollo called for his closest guard, a man who had sworn his life to protect him. In the quiet of night, he gave the order. End her. Tonight, she don't breathe come sunrise. But Sizzle wasn't just beauty. She was venom wrapped in silk. She saw the guard's hesitation, saw the flicker in his eyes, and knew how to bend him. Seduction was her weapon, and she wielded it sharper than any blade. In whispers and touches, she unraveled his loyalty. By dawn, he lay defeated, not in death, but in desire. And Sizzle was gone. She ran. Every shadow felt like a hunter at her back, every sound like Rollo's footsteps closing in. When she finally reached 9, her breath came in broken gasps, her eyes wide with both fear and fire. He knows, she told him. Rollo knows, and now he wants me dead. 9 studied her, torn between the discipline of his mission and the pull of her presence. She was running for her life, yes, but she was also dragging him deeper into a war he hadn't chosen. Rollo wasn't slow, but Sizzle wasn't weak, and 9 was about to find out just how much blood a heart could cost. Chapter draft. 9 questions. Sizzle. The safe house was quiet, shadows leaning long across the walls, but Nine's mind was loud, too loud. Sizzle sat on the edge of his bed, her blue eyes burning against her dark skin like a storm trapped in a bottle. She had just fled Lil Pakistan, breathless, hunted, claiming Rollo had ordered her death. She was trembling, but not weak. Not her. She had the kind of poise that made every word she spoke feel rehearsed, every glance a test. Nine leaned back in the chair, arms folded, eyes locked on her. He didn't move toward her, didn't touch her. He was calculating. "You running from Rollo," Nine said, his voice low. "Or you running some game on me?" Sizzle's lips parted, soft and sly. "I chose you, Nine. Don't you see that? I could have stayed, bowed to him, but I walked away. For you." Nine shook his head, a cold laugh escaping him. "For me, or for what I carry. Don't play me, Sizzle. I've been in this too long. You see a king, you think you can crown yourself queen. But tell me straight, what side you really on?" She stood, crossing the floor, slow, deliberate, her hips swaying like every step was "I'm on the side of power," she whispered. "And right now, that's you." Nine grabbed her wrist before she could pull back, his grip firm, eyes burning through hers. "Power ain't between your legs. It's in truth. And truth is, if you're lying to me, I'll bury you next to him." For the first time, the mask cracked. Fear flickered in her eyes, only for a second, but it was enough. Nine saw it. He knew then she was hiding something. Still, he let her go. Still, he let her stay. Because sometimes the best way to expose betrayal was to let it breathe, right under your roof. Chapter Draft. The trap in Texas. Nine stood in his high-rise condo, the lights of Atlanta flickering like stars scattered across the ground. From this height, the city looked invincible, eternal. But he knew better. Cities fell, kingdoms fell, men fell. He leaned against the glass, the weight of Sizzle's presence still in his chest. He told himself love was weakness, yet there she was, burning through his discipline like fire through dry leaves. She wasn't his. She could never truly be his. But somehow, he wanted to be hers. That thought alone shook him deeper than any enemy ever could. The phone vibrated on the counter, breaking the spell. Big O's voice came through heavy, urgent. "They got certified." Nine froze. "What you mean, got him?" "It's all over the news," Big O said. "He's the 19-year-old assassin. They baited him, used one of their best moles to draw him out." Nine's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Silence. Then Big O said the name. "Jay-Z." Nine's jaw tightened. He knew the game was dirty, but this cut different. Jay-Z had built a billion-dollar empire off music, branding, politics, held up as a symbol of black excellence. But behind closed doors, feeding the DEA information to crush competition, calling it politics. Nine called it what it really was, dry snitching in designer suits. According to Big O, Certified had caught wind of Jay-Z hosting a charity concert in Texas. Word was the mogul would be vulnerable. Certified set up shop, sniper rifle in hand, angles calculated, ready to prove why they called him the young ghost shooter. But it was all a setup. The arena was rigged from the inside. The moment Certified moved into position, federal agents swarmed. Cameras rolled, headlines screamed. They caught him dirty, with the same rifle he had used in hits that left streets whispering his name in fear. Now it was more than a bust. It was a statement. And Nine could see the web tightening. Certified wouldn't last under interrogation. The trail of bodies, the whispers of the Black Army, the files Nine carried, all of it would point back to him. He dropped the phone on the counter, hands pressed against the cool glass. Atlanta's lights blurred in his vision. Sizzle slid into the room like smoke, her blue eyes piercing. "What happened?" she asked softly. Nine didn't answer at first. His chest burned, not with fear, but with betrayal, rage, and the creeping truth he couldn't ignore. The fall he had always expected wasn't from bullets or prison cells. It was from love, trust, and weakness. And right now, all three were circling him like vultures. Nine's voice was steady, cold, when he called Eskimo Black. "The voice gotta be silenced," he said. "Make it mathematically perfect." Eskimo didn't need further instruction. He was a ghost in motion, quiet, invisible, surgical. This time he didn't move alone. At his side was a white hitman with the kind of ice in his veins that came from years of sanctioned kills in other countries. Together, they wore federal jackets, their forged paperwork pristine. To the guards, they were nothing but business. Inside the detention center, Certified sat cuffed to the cold steel table of the interrogation room. His young face was tight with calculation. He had always believed he was the best, deadly, untouchable, a prodigy with a rifle. But tonight, alone under fluorescent lights, he felt the walls pressing in. What more did they want from him? What else did they think he could give up? The door opened. Certified looked up and froze. Eskimo Sixlack walked in, calm as ever. "No! No! No!" Certified screamed, yanking at his cuffed wrist until blood rose. Panic drowned his voice. He knew what this meant. But Eskimo only tilted his head. "Relax, I came to get you." The guard at the door unlocked the cuffs. Papers shuffled, signatures scribbled. Certified blinked as a gun slid across the table to his palm. He clutched it like salvation. Moments later, chaos erupted. Bullets thundered through the halls as Eskimo and his partner forced their way down from the 5th floor, each move crisp, calculated. Certified grinned wide, his adrenaline surging as they carved their escape route through federal agents. By the time they reached the police cruiser outside, 2 officers already lay slumped in the front seats, blood soaking their uniforms. Certified climbed into the back, his heart pounding, a rare smile stretching across his face. He thought he was free again. Untouchable. But freedom lasted seconds. Eskimo turned, expression unreadable. One clean shot. A bullet entered behind Certified's ear, exiting in silence. His smile froze as life drained instantly from his body. On the evening news, the story broke. 2 rogue federal officers killed in attempted jailbreak. Notorious assassin Tyrese Certified. Mackenzie dies in Crossfire Final Act Draft. The fall of 9. Big O's voice was low, almost pleading. "She's a weak link, bro. Sizzle don't belong to this war, and neither do you. Look around. Snitches gone. Bodies stacked. What we even fighting for anymore?" 9 stared out over the skyline of Atlanta from the high-rise condo window, lights flickering like a city on fire. His tone was steady, calm. "The war's already over, O. We're done. We flee to Belize. We live like kings." Big O nodded, but deep inside the words burned. He didn't want palm trees and fake crowns. He wanted purpose. He wanted survival. That night, 9 and Sizzle celebrated the fantasy of freedom with their bodies. The sheets were white satin, the air thick with lust and promises. 9 felt her take him places no war, no hustle, no dollar bill ever had. He thought maybe he'd finally found peace. But Big O was already standing in the doorway, the shadows swallowing him whole. Tears streaked his face as he watched the man he once followed, his brother in arms, the lion of the streets, reduced to prey by love. The gunfire broke the silence. Bullets shredded the satin, blood blooming like crimson rose petals across the bed. 9's eyes shot wide open, his final breath dragging out as he clutched at the only thing he thought he could hold on to, his soul bound to Sizzle. Big O didn't linger. He packed the Porsche truck with as much cash as he could carry. In the garage, he slid behind the wheel. Dawn cracked open above Atlanta, the sky painted orange and purple, promising a beautiful day. "This for the real ones," he muttered, pressing call on a number burned into his phone. "Yo," a voice answered. 50 Cent. "What happened?" he asked, already sensing the shift. "They fell weak," Big O said simply. Silence. Then 50's voice, sharp with order. "Okay, but before you hit Rollo, make sure Big Michi is gone." The line went dead, leaving Big O alone with the dawn, the cash, and a war that was far from finished.